like to call this August 8th, 2017 Shelburne Select Board meeting to order. First, excuse me? Did someone say something? Did I not hear? First item up is approval of the agenda. Joe, are there any suggested changes, anybody? Hearing none, someone like to move to approve?
So moved.
Moved by John, seconded by Jerry. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Our next item is consider approving the Select Board meeting minutes of July 25th and August 2nd. Let's first take July 25th. Does anyone have any proposed changes? Hearing none, someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Move to approve the minutes of July 25th, right, Jerry?
2017 Select Board
By
minutes.
Jerry,
I'll second.
seconded by John. Any discussion? Anyone? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Recuse, okay. Next up is the minutes from August 2nd that Joe sent around earlier, and I believe everyone has a copy also.
Copy on your desk.
Pretty straightforward. Any proposed changes by anyone? Someone like to move to approve then?
So moved.
Moved by John. Is there a
Second.
seconded by Jerry. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, those are approved. Oops, what did I do with the agenda? I lost my agenda.
Find it?
Yeah. Next up is public comments. This is the time during the meeting when, if anyone here has anything they would like to say on a matter over which this board has jurisdiction that is not on tonight's agenda, this is your time to speak. So, who would like to go first? Ms. Brooks, please identify yourself and come to the microphone.
I'm Kathy Brooks. And part of it is on the agenda, but the part that I'm going to speak to is not on the agenda. I'd like to express my concerns around the process of the chief's suspension. I'm not commenting on specifics, nor do I expect you to. But I was very surprised when I read in the newspaper that the chairman of the Select Board was unaware of the chief's suspension until after the fact. In 40 years as a human resources executive, I've never heard of such a unilateral decision like that would be like suspending a senior executive without letting your board of directors know. I went onto the website for the town of Shelburne to see if there's anything in your HR policy. And by the way, your policy was last updated in October of 1990, your handbook. So there's a couple of updates, but you might want to look at that. And it says, and I quote, "The town manager, upon consulting the department head, may take action." And then another place it says, "The town manager and a department head will consider any disciplinary action." And obviously, since the person in question is a town, would be like a department manager, I would expect that they would consult someone on the select board, someone who is very able and has a legal background themselves, before making such a large unilateral decision. As a town, we want to be very careful. We don't want to be treating people, our long-term, age-protected employees, in a poor manner. These things, happen, and we set a precedent, and then it gets going. I suggest that we look at our management policies and practices, and know that a good manager seeks the counsels of the resources that they have. And I do have a couple of questions. The first one I read in the Shelburne, under the Shelburne News, some comments, and it said that we appointed a deputy chief and directed him to report directly to the town manager and not to the chief. I'd like to know if that is an accurate or an inaccurate statement.
Sure. I'm going to give you full chance to comment. What else you got, Kathy? And then we'll do it all in one shot.
And then there's also, it says we have plans for leadership succession and organizational planning, and I wonder if we're going to share that with the community.
Okay, I can tell you that that's already been shared.
Okay. Well,
That document's online.
Yeah.
I know, okay, I didn't
It's
see it
online.
online.
That's
Okay.
succession
I saw
planning
about
is.
2 paragraphs.
Yeah, first of all, I know Kathy very well. She's very experienced Human Resource Director, and some of your comments, unfortunately, I can't respond to at this time. I'll give Joe a chance to respond to some of them. Our personnel policy, you're absolutely right. It's something that we have flagged this year as something that the board intends to try to address through the use of staff. So you're absolutely right about that policy being outdated. In regard to the suspension, I believe no one on the select board knew about it in advance. I can tell you I didn't. I will not speak any more about it. I can tell you that the police chief reports to the town manager, not to the select board. So, but then I'll turn it over to Joe, because these comments seem to be directed to Joe, so.
What's the question that I'm answering at this point?
Well, were there any more other than those two?
No, I guess I want to understand why a unilateral decision was made without consulting some of your support team when, in any other situation, you would have.
I'm not going to make a comment on personnel decision.
That's not an issue, it's on process. There's a big difference.
Okay, I'm still not going to make a comment on that question.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Joe?
I'll add
Joe?
one quick thing. Actually, a remake of the personnel policies underway now. Has been for a period of time with the assistance of Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Others have noticed and addressed that same deficiency, and that's underway, you can be assured, and has been for some time.
And my second question was, prior to the suspension, was the deputy chief reporting to you, or was he reporting to the police chief? Okay, so those comments are in error in the.
Well, there's a nuance. There's a straight line relationship between the deputy chief and the police chief, and a dotted line relationship between the deputy chief and me. So he had
All right.
direct communication, but not reporting.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has any comments they'd like to make? Oh, yeah, hi. Please come on up. Identify yourself. Haven't seen you in a while. Welcome back.
So for those who don't know me, my name's Chris Boyd. Would like to bring up one little point.
Sure.
Falls Road near Church Road intersection.
Yeah?
So back when I was on the board, traffic study was done, and that area was targeted to get the speed reduced. And the study had shown that it originally wanted to go from like the post office to Route 7
Right.
for a reduced speed zone. The study showed that wasn't an appropriate distance, that Church Street to Route 7 was the appropriate area to reduce the speed limit, and the study also showed 30 was the minimum that speed limit could be reduced to. I see though, on repeated cases, the police department sets the radar cart up by the reduced speed limit sign before the church as you head to the village, and shows that as a 30-mile-an-hour set point for the speed zone, which it's not. That's the warning sign for Church Street. That's been done several times, and now it's marked there on the ground 30 miles an hour, which is the wrong place to mark it. It should be next to the speed limit sign at Church Street. It sets the town up to ticket someone for going faster in a speed zone than if it could be argued and dismissed. So why would the town even set itself up to mislead somebody? It should be corrected, that 30-mile-an-hour mark blacked out and moved up to Church Street.
Thanks, Chris.
And the speed cart put up there when it's up there.
Joe, you have anything to say about that?
I'll look at it with the police department.
I think that actually has an arrow pointing. I think that's a warning that the speed limit is going to change from 35 to
It's just a
30.
right there by the reduced.
Doesn't
speed
have an
limit.
arrow going forward to church.
So let's take a look at it,
Yeah.
Joe, and if it's an error, let's fix it.
Did you do that?
Thanks,
Sorry to
Chris.
bring it up.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you,
Chris.
Chris. Anyone else? All right. Next item is select board comments. Josh, you got anything?
No.
Jerry?
No.
John?
I'm good, thanks.
Colleen?
I'm good.
I almost never make comments, but I'm going to make a comment this time. Over the years, the Shelburne News has served our community well, reporting local news, doing its best to present the facts accurately. It has been a joy to work with past Shelburne News editors and reporters, including Margot Callahan, Sherry Duff, Lynn Monty, Boston Neary, and Heather McKim, all of whom embraced journalistic ethics, all sought to present the news fairly, and all did a great job. I believe that the Shelburne News recently has been, or currently is in the process of being sold. There has been a change in personnel, in particular recent editor Boston Neary and reporter Heather McKim, primarily responsible for reporting on the Selectboard, moved on. New people have arrived. I wish them and the paper the best. This week I was disappointed when I learned that the Shelburne News posted an online article that wrongfully attributed a statement to me. When informed of this mistake by the town manager, while the paper changed that portion of the online article, it failed to provide an addendum to the article, stating that the original article was mistaken and what the mistake was. A simple addendum of correction, standard in the industry, should have been and was not added. In addition, the online version of the article still claims, quote, "When the doors reopened, Chairman Gary Von Stange declined a request to wait to take action until members of the excluded public, including some media members, could file back into the meeting room," end of quote. At best, that statement is misleading. There were no members of the public excluded. The only people attending that meeting were Select Board members, the town attorney, the Shelburne News reporter writing that article, and a few other members of the media, including representatives of the Burlington Free Press and NBC5. Immediately after exiting executive session and before resuming open session, all media was informed by the town manager, and there was no one else present, that the Select Board would reconvene in open session and all were welcome to return. But one person, the Shelburne News reporter in the room, demanded that the board wait. But all other reporters present were informed and chose to stay directly outside the room in preparation for an interview. And the Select Board members, the town attorney, the Shelburne News reporter were all in the open meeting room. There was no one else. There were no excluded public. And the only item remaining in the open session was consideration of a motion for adjournment, hardly a topic of great discussion. In fact, I don't remember one instance of discussion in my 9 years on the board for a motion to adjourn. In my almost 4 years as chair of the Select Board, there has never been an instance of excluding the public from an open meeting. Never. To report of an excluded public is simply wrong. Again, having long embraced the reporting and people of the Shelburne News, I wish the new people there and the paper the best. All right, do we have a town manager's report?
Nothing. Our sidewalk projects are moving along really well, thanks to Ann's management. Besides that, nothing else to add.
Thank you. Our next item is item number 7, interview candidates and consider appointments to commissions, boards, and committees. So, Joe, we have Tim Luck, right?
Tim Laux, right. I did a good job in the last 2 weeks of finding a replacement to me as the CSWD director. Tim is still a resident in Shelburne. I think he was considering leaving, but he's staying, and he would like to be reappointed to the CSWD board. He's been Shelburne's representative for quite some time, and I think it would be appropriate to reappoint him, and certainly I would welcome that.
Great, and that's for a term through June 30th, 2019?
Yes.
Someone like, Tim has been before us many times. We usually have candidates for boards come before us, but he's been here many, many times, and I believe everyone here is quite familiar with him.
So move to appoint Tim
Laux.
Laux to the Board of Directors for the Chittenden Solid Waste District for the remainder of a 2-year term, ending June 30th, 2019.
Moved by Colleen, seconded by Jerry. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next, our CBC report.
Oh, we got one more.
Oh, we have one more, sorry.
Sorry, so, the select board, provided for a stormwater advisory committee. I don't know if everyone is here who is interested in that committee, but, many of them are. So the ones who have received, at least prior notification that they're interested in serving are Susan Mogenberg, who is on our Natural Resources Committee currently, Marty Illick, who's not a resident, but certainly she's very involved with Shelburne and stormwater, so that might make sense. Dick Elkins, I believe, is here. He's expressed interest. John DeBrule is not here, but I spoke with him on the phone, and he would like to be on the committee. Chris Davis is here. He's not a resident of Shelburne, but he certainly has some responsibilities in Shelburne that make it appropriate. Luce Hillman, I don't know if she's here right now, but she lives in town and she is a civil engineer. And then I see in the audience, I'm gathering that Chip, representative of the Shelburne Museum, may in fact be interested. We did reach out to Shelburne Museum to see if they would want to have a member on this committee, and so I see Chip is here. So those 7 members have expressed interest. Actually, a few others have expressed interest too. We've had to keep people. But this seems like a pretty solid team, in my opinion. So,
Great. How do you guys want to go forward on this?
I'd favor a motion that appoints the body, all 7.
Okay, anyone else in agreement? Good with that? Josh, you want to do something else?
I'm just curious, my understanding was that the composition of this committee would be, hopefully come from other committees on the, that are already existing, and I think Susan is the only one that's on that committee.
Dick Elkins.
Dick Elkins, yeah. Okay, I just wanted to point that out, that I think that would be a useful thing. I'm happy with what is there.
Sure, we have a comment, Gail Albert, if you could step up and identify yourself.
Gail Albert, and I'm the chair of the Natural Resources Committee, and I just wondered if you thought that it might be useful to have somebody from the agricultural community. I'm not referring to myself, but a farmer, perhaps, because stormwater is a big issue.
we've actively reached out to the farming community. We haven't had anyone take a bite yet, but certainly we'll keep working with them and suggest that they attend the meetings if they can. So we have actively reached out to the agriculture.
Is the committee limit 7?
I don't know if did we expressly say that, Ann?
We did.
We did.
Said up to 7 members.
But they're open, there'll be public meetings. There won't be any reason that someone else wouldn't be able to come and give their
Yeah,
input.
I just think it would be useful input.
Ann, you want to say something? This is Ann Janda.
Director of Administration. As we've been recruiting members, we do feel it's very important to have someone from the farming community on the committee. And my experience with farmers is that they tend to be shy. So I'm really trying hard to get someone on. If I can't get someone on the committee, what I'm looking for is just to find someone who would be willing to consult the committee as a farmer. So I have a farmer who's considering that right now. So.
Joe, could you remind me, this is an advisory committee, but do you remember how long we set up the term for?
Yeah, the term has not been defined, except that it's basically going to be set up until either the select board and the town makes a decides to go into a utility, or if we decide to just disband the idea. So really the heavy lifting for this committee will be between now and I would say Thanksgiving. And after that it will
Okay, so
basically be done.
I'd entertain a motion to approve the slate as presented by Joe for an undefined term.
So moved?
Moved by Jerry. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Any further discussion? Anyone? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All right.
So a little bit related, but just wanted to mention that with John DeBrule on this committee, I remember when Automaster expanded their site, he actually investigated and implemented stormwater drainage. Yeah, prior to it being necessary or dictated by law.
I believe
Because of his personal interest in it.
and I believe Automaster spent a substantial amount on that.
Yeah.
All right. I guess now we're ready for item number 8, our annual committee board commission report from the cemetery commission. So we got our guys back there. Hello. Come on up and please identify yourself for everyone.
I'm Stuart Morrow, Cemetery Commissioner.
Hi, Carol.
Carol Carlson.
Stuart's been on the commission for about 200 years, and Carol's been on for about 3.
Starting my 4th year.
Yeah.
So, it's been a challenging year with the weather, but we're getting there. We really don't have too many concerns. We are having a little frustration getting on our software with the town server, but I think that will work out here in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, we come up with a new game plan. It's just a lot of this is communications and who to communicate with, and I think we're getting there slowly. But the software is an important feature that we use regularly, and so when we can't use it, it's a little frustrating.
Don't you have a new member on your commission who is quite adept at this?
Jennifer Brown.
Yeah, yeah. We have 2 ladies, 2 commissioners that hopefully will can be a little more helpful than what we've had.
But now we have backup records for everything, right?
Well, my understanding, if you're on the town server, it all automatically backs it up. My understanding. I'm not an expert on that, but
Good. So if it's all on the town server,
Yeah.
fine.
No, we haven't lost any.
it's just we don't have access to our old system, so everything's on the server. I don't know if you have some questions or.
Does anyone on the board have any questions for Stuart? Josh, please.
I have a question, just because it's been in the news. Have you had any inquiries or interest in the concept of green burials?
Yes, we're going through that discussion. I had one couple interested last fall, and it didn't. She decided not to do anything, so we're re-looking at that. I personally don't think somebody that wants a green burial, I don't think a cemetery environment is what they're looking for, but we still need to address it, and we will address it. Yeah, Carol's been up on this.
As part of my responsibility on the committee, I attend during the time the legislature was debating the particular bill about the depth that was required for grave sites. I attended some of the educational sessions that were offered on that topic of green burials, and we've gathered a lot of information, and I'm hopeful, and I have presented this at our last meeting, that sometime during the coming year, a couple of those people who are very well informed on this issue and who have worked with funeral homes, who specialize in offering that service, and who've worked with cemeteries and commissions in other parts of the state, I'm hoping we can have some kind of a more public forum for the town just to inform people. And so that's kind of where we are with it.
Thanks, Carol. Anyone else have any questions for these guys?
No, just a quick congratulations on your effort, and a shout out to Ernie and his crew for
Wow, if it
what has
wasn't
to
for
have been a very difficult.
Ernie and Gene
Yeah.
and Pat Kingsland taking care of
They've
the,
had a difficult spring, I'm sure, and
but they do an excellent job.
Yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't ask for a better crew.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thanks. Next item is item number 9. Public hearing, second reading, and consider adopting a municipal ordinance regulating the storage, handling, and distribution of hazardous substances. I'm going to officially open the public hearing on this, and our charter provides that we need to read the entire proposed ordinance word for word unless there is a motion to read it by title only, which I certainly move is forward. Moved by Jerry, seconded by Colleen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. All right, so this is the ordinance regulating the storage, handling, and distribution of hazardous substances. Joe, why don't I turn this over to you for an intro?
Okay, I'll start off just by saying a lot of municipalities across the country have a similar type of ordinance. In fact, Winooski, just up the road, has something very similar. I would say that, the purpose of this ordinance is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Shelburne citizens from inherent risks associated with the storage, handling, and distribution of hazardous substances, which may be ignitable, corrosive, reactive, and/or toxic. I think to make a long story short, we all have an interest in avoiding things that go boom, and also avoiding things to pollute or poison our natural resources or drinking supply, something similar to that. So I would say that is more or less the intent here. And again, this is similar, very similar to ordinances that you see across the country. I think it's certainly the prudent thing to do. And updating ordinances, this one included, has been something that we've talked about for quite some time. So here we are.
Thanks. Any comments from anybody on the board? Josh?
So, I know this, I was out of town at the last meeting, so I couldn't contribute to the first reading, so I'd like to do that now. And I'd like to say that I think this is very relevant for the town, and it's good that it's being discussed. I'm not quite sure what generated the interest at this point, since it wasn't one of the select board priorities. However, since I'm an advocate for environmental issues and have some experience with hazardous materials and storage, I'm happy to advance this cause. So, although I realize this is still a draft, I'd like to share my review of the proposed ordinance and point out some of the areas where I think some changes could clarify and strengthen the document. So I think importantly to start, as Joe started with the preamble, I think this sets the tone that the town is interested in health of its citizens and its natural resources, and then therefore making possible accidents of contamination a worthy goal. So I think this is great. And sections 2 and 3 repeat these terms. I think section 4 is probably one of the more important ones of applicability, as it states that it's sense that we all have a part to play in this, and this ordinance should be applicable to all parties. And I'll refer back to this expression of inclusiveness. Number 5, section 5 is the definitions, and this is where I think there are some issues that do arise. One of the definitions, and in fact the first, is for discharge. And I apologize if the audience doesn't have a copy of this, but it's it is online. That I am curious why the discharges from vehicles and boats and airplanes have been excluded. Now, I've had my share of experience with oil spill responses, and I can testify to the long and short-term significant losses of these kinds of events. So I think I would recommend that this statement be deleted, just because I'm not quite sure why that kind of event would be exempted. The next definition is on what is an entity, and it's here that goes back to my statement about applicability, in that it says, the statement in section 4 claims applicability to all, but this definition limits the ordinance to businesses. And clearly, individuals dealing with significant quantities of hazardous substances should be included. For example, farmers often use and store larger quantities of potentially dangerous materials, and most likely they would be an individual which would not be covered under this. Also, I think that this should apply to government agencies such as the town. For the town of Shelburne must be compliant if we expect businesses to take this ordinance seriously. And even nonprofit organizations should also share the responsibility if warranted. So the next definition is for facility, and again, the conflict is if we look back at the definition of discharge, it excluded vehicles and aircraft. However, they're listed here, and so I think this needs to be reconciled. For the definition of hazardous substance is one of the most difficult definitions, as there's lots of, a multitude of definitions, depending on the regulatory agency and the context. It's also important to recognize that there is a difference between hazardous materials and hazardous wastes, as different regulations apply. The two listed here, CERCLA, which is the EPA Superfund regs, and the Vermont Waste Management regs, deal with hazardous waste and not specifically with hazardous materials storage. And there's also an item reference to Table 1, which I'll talk about later. The next definition was for release. And then, although there are problems with this definition in relationship to other definitions and other sections, at this point, the one thing that would be easy to clarify is under 2 to specify exhaust fumes, if those are the emissions intended to include. The definitions of storage limits and waterways I'll cover together, which then relate to the next section on prohibited acts. I feel that the concern about storage quantities should be extended throughout the town and not be limited to the vicinity of schools or waterways. If there is a significant concern about these risks to citizens, they should be the same concerns no matter where someone lives. This ordinance should be about equal protection and equal responsibility. The definition of waterways is sufficiently broad to most likely include the entire land surface of Shelburne, so in reality is not really needed. Simply stating this, that the ordinance is in effect throughout the town, will result in equal protection and clearer oversight. And this is demonstrated by the language in Part B on dumping. We then come to Section 6, which is about prohibited acts. And here, the specifications for storage locations should be removed for the reasons I've already stated. Those restrictions are proximity to school and waterways, which limits where this ordinance has effect. Although referred to in Part C, there is no definition for a pre-existing filling station, and this could potentially lead to misinterpretation or confusion. It should be clearly stated what is covered here, with the reality that there may be a loss of business development opportunities due to this restriction. In Section 7, which relates to release and discharge reporting, although there's a welcome intent in this section, it may cause some confusion and uncertainty for those responsible for the materials. For example, the requirement in Part A to report discharge greater than its reportable quantity would present a problem for any of the chloride compounds listed in Table 1. None of these materials are listed in the reference CERCLA Superfund regs, so there are no reportable quantities available. A similar situation on a reportable quantity exists for the petroleum products listed, but these may be covered by other regs. Section 9 covers enforcement, and a question here which refers to officials having access to property one might ask, how and when would an official know where to check properties for hazardous materials? Is it anticipated that a registry would be compiled? And so, if so, how? And at various places in this section, there is a mention of a local board of health. And to my knowledge, the town does not have a board of health, so it would be useful to clarify what this refers to. It also states that an emergency health order can be issued to a person, which seems inconsistent with the entity definition, which does not include individuals. Sections 10 and 11 have similar problems regarding references to persons and a local board of health. We now can move to Table 1, which does list the agents that are not listed in the other two references, but it's not clear to me how either these substances or quantities were chosen for inclusion in the table. As I mentioned previously, none of the chloride compounds are listed as hazardous materials in the reference regulations, and I have not found them clearly covered under other regulations. For the chloride compounds, it's not clear whether the storage limitations are for each form separately or combined. There are quantities listed for ammonia, chloride, and hydrogen fluoride, which are quite large, but these substances are clearly toxic in much smaller volumes. In reality, less than 100 parts per million. If we are serious about our concerns about the storage of these materials, then I think we should explore setting much lower storage capacities throughout the town, and it would take further research to determine an appropriate amount. We also need to weigh carefully the balance of storage limits and the potential effects on local businesses and future business development. I can ask, has there been a survey to determine how many petroleum storage tanks larger than listed capacities already exist in the town? And would they be grandfathered? And if so, how would that determination be accomplished? So, at this point, I'd like to thank you for your patience for me to go through these comments, and I look forward to any answers and feedbacks. Although it may not seem this way, I think I've only scratched the surface of the potential upsides and downsides to this ordinance, with lots more work to do. This is a good start in an area that needs attention, but I think there are inconsistencies and deficiencies that warrant additional attention from the next draft, and which I'd be happy to help with any revisions. I'd also like to recommend that the draft of this ordinance would benefit from a review by the Natural Resources Committee, and it would be useful to examine ordinance from other towns, such as Joe mentioned, if Winooski has one or other one. I would certainly like to see how those are worded. I think the items in Table 1 should be reevaluated for both items that might be added, deleted, or modified. For example, it seems like propane should be included with the other petroleum products. So again, thanking you. I look forward to additional review and discussion on the ordinance before any consideration of its adoption. Thanks.
Joe, those extensive comments, I'm sure you received them in advance, right?
No, I didn't receive them any in advance, so I didn't have a chance. The only one I wrote down was about the Board of Health, which is the Selectboard. I didn't have a chance to write everything else down, so I can't respond right here.
I really couldn't complete it until I received the documents that you sent this morning with a listing of the agents.
All right. Does anyone else have any comments?
No.
Chris?
Yes, sir. So,
Just could you wait to speak to the mic, please?
Sure.
Thanks, Chris.
If I could start with a question. Could somebody explain the number and size of incidents that have brought about a concern to have an ordinance like this?
I think this is a general concern that is facing communities throughout Vermont, and frankly, all over the country. This is an item that I know Joe and I have been discussing ever since he arrived here 3 years ago. I can't give you a number. I don't know what the number is of incidents in Shelburne, but it wouldn't be just in Shelburne. It would be in any community because it could happen here in Shelburne.
It can. There's no doubt about that. But there's also an elaborative response network that responds to that type of call when it goes out. My concerns with this ordinance, and I didn't get into it as detailed as you did. I just got a chance to give a cursory, and I didn't realize there was already a first reading on this, so I apologize, I'm coming into this late. The reporting side of it is misleading. Spills are supposed to be reported to 911 first, and then there's a process which includes state hazmat and whatnot to help mitigate those responses, and also to help make sure those responsible for the spill pay for the spill. And if that's not possible, it helps get a process in place for federal funding to help cover it. Doing a standalone ordinance I see as very risky for a very broad-based subject. Hazardous materials is something that blows the mind when you look at how encompassing it is. I don't know that, not knocking anybody's expertise here, but has local emergency services been in a review with this?
Joe has been in contact with the fire department, yes.
Okay, and what about the state hazmat chief?
I can't tell you everything that Joe has done. I can tell you that there's been
Okay.
extensive research on this ordinance, and this has been going on for quite some time.
With quantities, were the national codes referenced
As
at
a matter
all?
of fact, I believe they were, and an expert was brought in to assist with drafting this ordinance.
All right, that's fine. It's a very broad-based ordinance that opens the town up to a lot of liability that I really don't believe it needs to be open to. So,
Thanks, Chris.
yeah.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
So just the question where I think you may have been leading to was if there were any incidences that led to the institution of this policy. And the goal is not to have to respond to something, but to hopefully have guidelines in place to prevent something from happening. And I'm sure we can all think of many examples in which safety precautions have been taken or put into place before something bad happens, or because something's happened in another community and we don't want it repeated here in Shelburne. For example, even on Falls Road, there has not been a fatality on Falls Road due to speed, but we are looking into increasing safety precautions there because it's become apparent to everybody who lives there and travels through that area that changes need to be made, even though nothing has actually ever happened. So just one example.
And I understand that, but just to jump to one point I meant to make, is there going to be any type of personnel hired to do an enforcement and survey of businesses for compliance with this ordinance?
Any decisions, from being on the board for hiring people would have to wait for budget talks.
So,
You know that.
So to have the ordinance, but to have no method to enforce it, that puts some extra liability on the town as well.
Joe, you want to
Well, that was
just,
an enforcement mechanism. We have a health officer. So.
Who's trained in hazardous materials?
I can't list off everything that the health officer is trained in.
Right.
But it
Thank
does
you.
have an enforcement.
right, thanks,
It's
Chris.
broad-based.
Okay, thank you. Gail?
Yeah, I feel like the Natural Resources Committee should be given the opportunity to review this, although I don't know from whence it was drafted. I know that even our expertise, and we have a fair amount of expertise in science on our committee, would take some research to be able to review it and make some valuable comments for it. So I would like to think that we at least have the opportunity to do that before you go ahead and approve an ordinance. And I was taken by a lot of Josh's comments about being more specific so that we can be sure that we're addressing it in a way that we can actually enforce it.
Thank you, Gail. Please, if you could identify yourself, use the mic. Thanks, Matt.
My name is Matt Coda. I'm a resident of South Burlington. I come here before you as the executive director of the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association. We are a nonprofit trade association that represents the people that distribute hazardous materials, heating oil and propane. Companies like ABBA Fuels, Patterson Fuels, Trono Fuels, AmeriGas, Suburban, and 100 other companies across the state of Vermont. And as you can imagine, we're opposed to this regulation. But I hope you would view me not as someone that could be as a resource to help you as you draft this regulation, and as you think about changing it. The first question that comes to my mind is why 55,000 pounds? We've got trucks that deliver heating oil to many people here in Vermont.
I think you're speaking to the truck ordinance.
Speaking to load limits.
This is the hazardous materials ordinance we're
Gotcha.
speaking of. The
Gotcha.
truck ordinance, I think, is up next.
Gotcha. Okay, so let me speak specifically to the hazardous materials ordinance. You list as the fuels, you don't list kerosene, diesel fuel, or biodiesel, or blended biodiesel as your list of exempted storage containers or hazardous materials that go in storage containers. I think that's an oversight. We certainly wouldn't want the folks in Shelburne that use kerosene to stay warm in the winter to be banned from heating their homes. So I think that should be added, as well as diesel fuel used by the farmers, whether it's dyed diesel or clear diesel, or biodiesel blended fuel. So that should be added to the list of exemptions. And then when we have an opportunity to talk about trucking.
Yeah, you'll allow,
Thank
please
you.
come back and
Right.
make a comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Next, please identify yourself. And then you'll be next.
Peter Young for Vermont Rail. I just wanted to note that we submitted a letter, written comments earlier today. I don't know that they've made its way to all the board. We have additional copies here if not, but we set out our concerns regarding the hazardous material ordinance in that letter to you and town manager earlier. So, thank you.
Thank you. Please, ma'am.
There's extra copies up there.
I have copies here.
Sir. Hi, if you could please identify yourself also. Thank you.
Bruce Hartshorn from Shelburne Shipyard. And obviously, because of the fuel we dispense down there at the yard, we are far in excess of the limits that are within this proposed document. We hope that we are grandfathered in or exempted under 6C, but 6C as it is currently written seems to be a little ambiguous because it refers to pre-existing fuel filling stations, which it's one of the functions we do, but it is not our primary function. We're a shipyard first that sells fuel. We have 10,000 gallons of gasoline on site. We have 10,000 gallons of diesel on site. It is all covered. It is bunkered. It is inspected by the state, by EPA. There's containment. There's the stormwater pollution prevention plan that's filed with the town, with the fire department. So we've done everything we feel we need to do or should do or want to do, and are hoping that when this is planned and finalized, the exemption for pre-existing storage and disbursement facilities is clearer such that we can be and should be included in that, because we can't move our tanks from the water. We've been there for decades. So we just wanted to make the select board aware of that situation and how it applies to us and impacts us, because we move over 100,000 gallons of product per season to the boating community. So we realize it's large. We are trying to be safe about it. We are safe about it. But we certainly, if the ordinance comes into play, we want to comply with it, hopefully in an exempted status.
Thank you, Bruce. Please. Oops. He's first, you're next, okay? Just identify yourself, please.
I'm sorry. Trampus Demers from Shelburne Limestone. Just want to direct my question to Joe. When he referred to things that go boom, does that include explosives?
I would just say, generally speaking, that's kind of the purpose of the ordinance.
So so when I read this under prohibited acts, is flammable material considered under that? Because it just says hazardous materials.
I think there's something in here about ignitable materials.
So I guess my question is that it says 3,280.84 feet. We have explosives at the site that are within 1,000 feet from the inhabited building in explosive magazines that are approved from ATF, inspected on a 2 to 3 year basis, inspected twice a year by the Mine Safety and Health Administration. And I guess my question is that going to be considered in this proposal ordinance?
If you're asking me whether or not you're going to fall under any enforcement, I guess that's really hard for me to answer on the spot, to be quite honest with you.
Well, I guess my question is that if ATF comes in and tells me I have to do something, and then the town select board tells me I have to do something, there's a pretty good chance that ATF's going to trump it. Because it
could be.
And so I guess what I'm saying here is that I'm in agreement with Josh that your thoughts and efforts are correct. We just need to do some more studying to figure this out, because there's a lot more things that are going on in the town of Shelburne that need to be considered when we're taking on something this large. And in businesses, I'm just like the shipyard. I've got 10,000 gallons of diesel fuel there that I need. And then I also need my explosives so that we can drill and blast and shoot the stone as we do. So I just appreciate it if you could take that into consideration when you're looking at this. And I think Josh is right that maybe many of his questions were right on, and I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thanks. We had a gentleman back there. Just please identify yourself. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Taylor Paul. I'm here from Lake Champlain Transportation Company. I just wanted to bring up the fact that our dry dock out on Shelburne Point is the only such facility on the lake for any vessel that's too large to either leave under the bridges or make it out of any of the locks. And our particular vessels, like the other companies who've been here, hold about 10,000 gallons apiece. And due to the nature of the dry dock, we'll always be close to the water. I just wanted to bring that up. And I also wanted to ask the board if your storage limits included fuel and portable equipment, welders, air compressors, equipment that's being used on a daily basis, as well as a total storage tank.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Please. I guess you know now to identify yourself, right?
Thomas Murphy. Been a resident about 10 years now. And first I want to, I guess, second Josh's investigation and work. I've been employed in the hazardous materials industry for 20 plus years. I've done a lot of emergency spill response here in Shelburne, throughout the state. I've worked very closely with the state of Vermont and EPA on a number of things. So to echo some of your concerns, CERCLA, the Superfund site guidance is very, very complicated. The reportable quantities, a reportable quantity may be 1,000 pounds of a particular substance, but that doesn't mean 100 pounds or 10 pounds could be very harmful to our community. So I think a closer look to that exact definition of what should be a reportable should be considered. But it throws me back to the rules and regulations set forth by the state of Vermont. And I've been very lucky and have a great relationship with the state of Vermont and helped them in various rules and regulations, underground storage tank, above ground storage tanks, things like that. So I guess I question how come the town isn't comfortable, or maybe that's not the right word, but I rely on the state of Vermont and the state of Vermont's rules and regulations, and they're very stringent and they're very enforceable. And when it comes to, you know, and I understand Joe's comment of we want to avoid things that go boom, but that's a very alarmist approach to this very detailed conversation we're having. And I agree with the proactive approach to things. And communities and businesses in this town that are proactive, The shipyard has an amazing facility that stores our fuel. And I haven't witnessed the one next door at the transportation facility, but I'm sure it's just as well. So when businesses in this town are following the rules and regulations set forth by the state of Vermont and the EPA for hazardous material, a lot different than hazardous waste, and even when hazardous wastes are generated in our town and they're managed properly, following the hazmat rules and regulations of the state of Vermont, then we don't have to have such a reactive approach to things. Now, I agree, there's risk. There's risk in what we do. If we all drove our cars here tonight, we're putting hazardous materials in our car every time we go to the gas station. So there's a lot here, a tremendous amount of rules and regulations. I applaud the efforts to make this community safer, but I've witnessed a lot of things, I've dealt with a lot of rules and regulations, and I would support further investigation and further details to really fine-tune what you guys are attempting to do.
All right.
Thank you
very much, Thomas.
Thank you.
I see a piece of paper in there, but I can't see who it is. No, I think we have lights back there if you guys want lights. Just please identify yourselves.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
My name is Dave Allen. I live on Harbor Road. I'm a contractor, and I'm concerned that this board would take on a task that's already being performed by other agencies in the state, and to the peril of the board and to, let me say, perhaps people who are not adept in this field. If, on the other hand, you're really keen on going forward, I listened to the shipyard's concerns and the ferry concerns and request that you exempt all facilities that are currently licensed by the state and by the Coast Guard, so you folks don't have to learn all about what that means. As long as they are covered by licensing agencies that are far smarter than us in this room, it seems to me you should pass your judgment on to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Brian Precourt.
I wanted to echo what, Brian Precourt, sorry. I wanted to echo what Chris said. When I first read it, I was wondering, you know, was there a problem? Was there an ongoing problem, you know, in town with this? And the other question I had was how these limits were came up with for diesel fuel and unleaded fuel, because farmers and contractors are going to have problems with those limits. The other thing was, I think if the town looks at, the board looks at what some of the spills have been in, even in the village, you're exempting it, because on 6C, you're exempting heating oil. Well, I think if you look at the map, you'll see that most of the leaks, short of Spillane's in the village, were all done by underground heating oil tanks. I know this because 6 of them were ours. When we bought the shopping park, there were 6 tanks in there leaking. We dug them up, so, but that's exempted, and that seems to be where the problem has been. So, my first read through, I didn't see why it was exempted and why these other limits were brought up. So, thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Seeing no one? Any comments from the board?
No, I commend Josh's review. I think that was a fantastic piece of work and very helpful and contributes to the task of our review. I'm very appreciative.
John?
I think that there are some good arguments put forth today about various changes that could potentially be made in the document. My feeling overall is no matter what policy it is or whether it's a town plan, it's always a living document, and we have to start somewhere. I think that this is a very thorough, good start. And while I appreciated Josh's comments and everybody else's here, this, I do feel very strongly about putting something on paper, and we can move from there. And as I already stated, I think that there's always going to be changes. There's things that we can't foresee, but we can deal with what we know now and what we've seen in other communities. And I feel comfortable going forward with the policy.
So you feel we could always enact this and then pass amendments, make changes if our expert and legal advisors so suggest?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate your comment, Colleen, but I'm not sure that's the most efficient way to go about doing this. As people have said, this is a really complex issue, and I would really be concerned about passing something just because we should have something in place. And even though it's been stated we've been dealing with this for a while, this has never, in my knowledge, this has never previously come up before the Select Board. And I'm not sure there is necessarily a rush to move to something that, as people have said, there are lots of regulations for. And so, for example, one of the other items we're going to be talking about is the stop sign ordinance. Well, we started discussing that as a Select Board in the fall, and we're just getting around to dealing with it now. So I don't think there's really a need to quickly move forward until we get it right. And yes, I think it is a living document. We can always make changes, and we always can make things better. But I think we need to start with something that addresses a lot of the questions that I've have with the ordinance as it stands, and that other people have said that as well. So I don't think we accomplish anything by passing something that's not very well, that has some questions.
John, what do you think? Do you think Colleen's position or Josh's or something else?
Well, I agree with Colleen that we need to start somewhere. You know, I think that something like this, you know, needs to be given the due consideration of what it is. I think that we need to take into consideration the public comment that we've received, and tweak this accordingly, and not just put it in place and forget about it, because I think it's important to clarify what is an exemption, what's not an exemption. Vermont Rail, you know, makes some comments. I haven't seen them, Peter, but I think, you know, we're entitled to look at them and make sure that, you know, if there's anything of concern there, we address it. I do know, based on material that I read, that the fire chief did weigh in and was comfortable with this. He had similar comments in clarification, but he was comfortable overall with this type of thing. So I think it's important to start somewhere, if you will, and go forward from there. So
okay,
that's where I'm kind of camped.
Thanks, John. So, Jerry, what do you think?
Yeah, my feeling is, on the other hand, there seem to be two serious concerns that could sum up a lot of the commentary. One is the extent to which we're knowledgeable about what's here. And clearly that's a concern that may stretch all the way from the rails communication to others who've spoken to the fact of what's in the ground, what's in practice, what's a business supplement. You can imagine, I think we have a responsibility in developing this ordinance to consider what's existing in the town and to what degree or in what number those are going to be exempted or not. I think there have been a serious question as well about enforcement. I was taken by Mr. Murphy's comment that there is a set of Vermont standards that perhaps could be incorporated in here. I'm not sure that the degree to which they are. I would favor some more development time. respecting wholly Colleen's point that we should be proactive, we shouldn't wait on an event to try to address it, and perhaps in short order, we could redevelop this and have it more ready for adoption.
Is there agreement among the board that we do have an interest in protecting the health, safety, and welfare of the residents from the inherent risks of storage, handling, distribution of hazardous substances? I mean, we have that obligation, right?
I don't see how you couldn't.
Does everybody agree with that? I do. I think you started out by saying you agree with the purpose of it. So then we have the question, do we go forward with something which I have been told has been vetted not only by the town attorney, but by an expert on this? We know that other communities in Vermont, Winooski in particular, I believe, has passed hazardous substance ordinance. So it's not as if we would be breaking ground as a community in passing something. Please.
Yeah, and I agree. I think everybody else agrees that it's something that we should be considering. My major concern is that I would certainly like to see the review of other parties that you mentioned, but even I think most importantly, if we were to, given my concerns and what I've stated that I think are pretty distinct things that are inconsistent and could be easily changed, if we were to go ahead and pass something as it's written now, when's the next time it would come up again? And once the ordinance is passed, then all the concerns that the public has made to us are now on the table. And then what do? And they have a lot of questions that really need to be asked. So yes, I agree that our obligation is to protect the welfare of the town and its natural resources. However, that shouldn't be at the detriment of businesses and townspeople who will be burdened with a document that really doesn't address a lot of the things that need to be addressed. So I'm not quite sure why there's a need to rush forward with this when, as has been stated, there are lots of other state and federal regulations that already cover this material. So I'm not quite sure why there is any reason to pass something quickly that really doesn't meet the needs of the town.
Well, just in response, Josh, like I don't feel that this is being done quickly, and this is the second reading. This is proceeding with a regular process, the way that we pass any other ordinance, whether it's the food truck ordinance or anything else. And I think that this is probably the best way to elucidate any potential conflicts. If we put this on the back burner, then people aren't aware of it. And here at the second reading, then we've had some comments where it could probably easily answered, and if I had had more time, like if I had had your comments before, and I understand why you weren't able to, but if I had had them, then I would have been able to look through this, but instead of me kind of flipping back and even a couple of things, like just at the beginning when you said about the definitions and how it doesn't have a person, well, it does. It was really just talking about definition of terms. And after a while, it was too hard to try and follow and find where the reference was. And so, and just the couple of things that I noted about that, or somebody had mentioned about how the reporting is supposed to be to the town first, and really it's supposed to be 911. It does say in order 911, and I think that's common sense for the most part. But I still feel that this is a document that needs to be in place, not to supplement or to replace or supplant what the state regulations are, but it's actually to support. And making the town responsible is, I think, a big part of it. And nobody knows Shelburne better than the people who live here. And having more eyes and the public safety officer responsible as well, I think can only lead to increased safety.
I agree with all of those things. My biggest concern is, I think, one of process, in that, as you said, we have a first reading and a second reading, and usually it's after the second reading and we have accumulated all of the comments from the public, then we come up with a final draft, which is then something that we feel comfortable with. Given the number of comments that have been made, I'm not sure why putting it on the agenda for the next meeting or the meeting after that, and working through some of these to at least address the basic concerns. I'm not sure what that delay is going to cost the town.
And most of the comments that I've heard, with one exception, which is about the exceptions, which I think is probably answerable, is there hasn't been anything substantially different to this document that I've heard. There have been some clarifications, but nothing substantial. And so I think that those are things that can be addressed at a later time and further review.
I disagree. I think there are lots of substantial concerns that certainly I have.
I understand.
All right, I want to give other people a chance. I just didn't want to interrupt this back and forth. Chris, if you could just please use the microphone.
Sure.
We have 2.5 million people watching on TV. They all need to hear you.
So, understand it's a living document, but there are a lot of concerns with it. And to implement something in place, it really should be a functional living document. And I do not think this document is functional. But I would be happy to contact the state hazmat chief, A&R, to bring some extra experts in to help look over in the process with this committee or this panel and make this a functional living document. Something's going to happen, but let's make it something that's beneficial to the whole town. Not some, pardon the expression, I don't mean to throw stones, but not something that's going to haphazardly look at a fear and try and react to it. Let's address the issues and make sure they're taken care of. And if they are issues.
Thank you, Chris. And Tom, or Matt, which one of you want to speak? You guys determine. Okay, this is Matt Cota again from the Fuel Dealers Association.
That's right, and I apologize. I forgot to add that on August 15th is a momentous day for me because professionally, I've been working the past 18 months with the State of Vermont Agency of Natural Resources on the above-ground storage tank rules. You may have heard there have been a number of news stories in WCAX, but all 150,000 heating oil and kerosene storage tanks in the state of Vermont now have to be inspected at least once every 3 years, that there are 5 criteria in which a fuel dealer must refuse to fill and red tag that tank. And this was promulgated because of a state law through an 18-month rulemaking process. So with respect, waiting a week to make sure that your ordinance is working with the state law, I think is an appropriate delay in order to make sure. Again, these rules go into effect on August 15th, and they regulate all 150,000 residential, commercial, above-ground storage tank rules. It seems to me that this regulation should comply with the state law. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give you 1 second, Thomas. Before you go, I just want to make sure everyone has had an opportunity to speak once before anyone speaks twice. I know Chris and Matt spoke twice, but has everyone had an opportunity to speak once?
Somebody's waving a thing behind the middle post.
I can't see the person behind the middle post if you're waving something.
That's me with my newspaper again.
Oh, you've spoken before. You can speak again if you like. I just give Thomas Murphy, right?
Yes. Thank you. So, as the citizen of the town, my safety net you know, for my environment and for my health and my sons and the La Platte River and everything else, my safety net is the state rules and regulations. For all these above-ground storage tanks we talk about, they're regulated by the EPA. You know, Region 1 out of Boston maintains the compliance points and the enforcement points for all above-ground storage tanks that contain more than 1,320 gallons of fuel. So I'm very comfortable relying on the EPA to manage above-ground storage tank rules and regulations, and I'm obviously very comfortable with the state of Vermont with all their various has waste, has material rules and regulations. So I wouldn't want to put something, you know, I wouldn't want to move forward with this just to have something to hang our hat on. We have the state and the EPA to hang our hat on. And I'd be more than happy to provide some written comments, and I apologize I didn't do that before tonight's meeting. But I can, similar to you, I've got a consulting background in the rules and regulations, so I'm happy to contribute because I'd like to make it as great a product as possible for this town. But I would hesitate to put something on the books now just to have something on the books. We have the state rules and regulations, and we have the EPA that we can, that I rely on and sleep comfortably knowing that, you know, every day the train goes by with fuel on it. Every day trucks coming down Route 7 and up Spear and everywhere else, up Irish Hill. I know our day-to-day commerce involves the transportation of hazardous materials. I know there's industries in this town that produce hazardous waste. It doesn't mean it's getting thrown out the back and polluting. It's being properly stored in drums and containers, and it's being picked up by the appropriately licensed and regulated hazmat material handlers. So I guess I would just, in closing, push for more homework, more detail. And if I can contribute, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you, Thomas. Well, let me ask everyone on the board. I'm trying to think of a way to compromise here, serve our purposes, make it known what our goals are, possibly not go forward with the entire ordinance as written. And what do you think of this? If we make a motion, you know, using the preamble of this as a guideline, that pursuant to our police powers, the town of Shelburne has an interest in protecting the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens from the inherent risks associated with the storage, handling, and distribution of hazardous substances which may be ignitable, corrosive, reactive, and/or toxic. The town of Shelburne intends to enact an ordinance using the ordinance presented as a model to regulate the storage, handling, and distribution of hazardous materials, substances near or adjacent to the town center, schools, and natural resources to protect the public from contamination, fire, or explosions. That's the whole thing. So in other words, we are stating that we have, pursuant to our police powers, the right, the interest in protecting the health, safety, and welfare of our citizens, and that we intend to enact an ordinance, but we are not doing it right at this time so we can address some of these concerns that have been presented tonight. What do you think of that?
I'm comfortable with it.
What do you think, Jerry?
Yeah, I think if it stresses the development of an ordinance which meets the matters addressed in the first paragraph, with which we're all in agreement, and recognizes the amount of new information, not the least of which the distinctions between waste and materials, I'd be comfortable that it would keep development on the front page, so to speak, and we may well be able to conclude this sometime this fall. I'd ask Joe, however, what the extension might mean in terms of accommodation of the charter and as well staff.
I guess I'm not clear the exact question, but you know, things do get busy in the fall. By the charter, the select board has warned this appropriately and has gone through the steps to adopt it tonight if it so chooses. It's not an anomaly for the select board to amend ordinances that are passed. I mean, we do that on a pretty regular basis. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Can we extend the third and final reading
It's, we
You
have
vo- you
first and
warned-
second reading,
You warned tonight as a public hearing.
this is, we're in the public
Okay.
hearing right now.
Okay, gotcha.
So it's up, I mean, it's up to the board, quite frankly, but, you know, we amend ordinances on a pretty regular.
We do amend them
Basis.
regularly. What do you prefer?
Well, I mean, I really appreciate your effort to come up with a compromise on this, Gary. I think it's a worthwhile goal. I'm just not sure it really accomplishes anything. And we've spent a lot of time talking about it, but I would feel much more comfortable putting the work into actually creating an ordinance that really does what we want it to do, rather than platitudes about this is something we do. Because if this is a precedent, then we could probably come up with all sorts of things that we'd like to do in the future, but they really don't necessarily mean anything. So while I appreciate the sentiment and your motivation, I'm not really sure it does anything.
So with the, proposed motion, I suppose is the term, can we incorporate a timeline into that?
Sure.
For
Motion can be,
next meeting, substantial revision, if you want to call it that, to this, with input from folks that have volunteered to give it to us, and to determine at that time, kind of where we go. And it seems to me that we're pretty close if we do that, so that's 2 weeks from now. We ought to be in a better position to vote to approve or adopt. But I think adopting the motion that we intend to do it puts, a stake in the ground for the board to react to it. And I don't think we should just kind of pass it and just let it go. I think we really should drive it to some conclusion with input. Certainly, there's a lot of it here tonight, but I'm certain we can get more, so.
Well, my feeling is I actually agree with Josh that I don't think that it does very much. And I think that, we can say whatever we want to, and then we can have a long list of wishes that we can always, add. But I think that that's exactly the argument why we should just move to approve this now. Because you give it enough time and people will constantly change it, because it's a document that is supposed to be changed with time. And if we don't approve it and we just have this, this statement, I think there's advantages and disadvantages to it. I think the advantage is at least we've said, yes, this is important, we want to have this in place. The disadvantage is that it will take a backseat to something else, versus putting it in place and amending it as necessary, versus not putting anything into place and then just hoping that nothing else comes up that's more urgent that we have to deal with.
one of the things we could do is, and this is off the top of my head, I believe ordinances pursuant to 24A, Chapter 147, which is the Shelburne Town Charter, again off the top of my head, become effective after a certain time frame. And I don't have it in front of me, but I think it might be 21 days.
Effective a date,
No,
every ordinance.
unless,
Right.
unless the
Effective.
ordinance specifically sets forth a different date, which this proposed ordinance does, which says the ordinance shall take effect upon passage. So what we could do is pass the ordinance and just change the effective date for a date pursuant to the town charter. And I'm only using that language because I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head. And if you could check Chapter 147 and look up ordinances, you could probably tell us what it says.
It says here, effective date, every ordinance shall be effective upon passage unless otherwise specified, or if the ordinance be a condition upon approval of voters of the town.
Okay,
you
so I
can-
got it backwards.
Unless otherwise specified.
Could we also not close the public hearing and continue it at the next meeting
have the ordinance.
and allow time for review and revision? Because I do agree with you, Colleen. I think some of the objections can be grouped. I don't mean to suggest that it's been repetitive comment. That's not my point. But some of the concerns that have been expressed tend to be gathered. Josh has a comprehensive list. I'm sure he'd be willing to contribute as well as Mr. Murphy. And if we don't close the hearing, we could just resume this at the next meeting.
Then the ordinance would not pass tonight.
No, we would not close the public hearing. That would be that, and we thank everybody for coming, and we'd resume this in 2 weeks.
That seems like a reasonable.
Well,
And meanwhile, Gail's committee would get a shot at it, right?
hold on, Gail. I believe we need to indicate that we are going to go forward with this ordinance. And unless people are ready to do that, then I'm going to side with Colleen probably and vote in favor of its passage. And I think John indicated that at the beginning also. So, you guys want to do something else?
I agree with Jerry on keep the public meeting open. Gives us a chance to work on it.
All right, is there, everyone has had a chance to talk. I'll give everyone a second chance. We've already had a couple people, I think 3 people speak twice. Gail?
It seems to me that this ordinance or proposed ordinance is very complex, and it became more complex as I listened tonight. I don't have a background in these issues, but it does sound to me as though there would be a number of businesses and institutions here in town that would be at risk of being out of compliance with this if you were to pass it as it's written. And that seems, it seems as though, having heard what we've heard, it makes sense to go back and at least address some of those issues before we put those people in that situation. And certainly, our meeting tomorrow night for the Natural Resources Committee doesn't have time to warn this as an official item. And so to be able to discuss it and come up with a conclusion by tomorrow is not possible. This is not an ordinance that we've had put before us in the past, and so I imagine there would be some background we'd need in order to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, did you have something else, Colleen? I'll get to you. Colleen, did you have something else?
Just that I like the idea of, like, if we could put the in effect date, and it gives us time, because no amendments may be needed. You know, there's a lot of questions about exceptions, and those exceptions may apply, but I don't feel comfortable saying that they do until discussing it with an attorney, but they might be absolutely fine. And so I would be in favor of moving forward with this policy with a delayed effective time. And even if we, you know, even if we put the effective date as, like, you know, end of September.
60 days?
Or 60, yeah, I was gonna say 2 months, but yeah. And hopefully that would give other committees that do want to have some input, like Natural Resources, time to do that. And like she said, they can't even put it on the meeting for tomorrow, and nobody would expect you to. But at least gives them some time to think about it.
All right. Well, everybody's had a chance to talk. Many people several times.
Hand in the back.
Another hand? Okay. All right. Come on up to the mic. Oh, repeat. Hello again.
I'm Dave Allen from Harbor Road. I want to ask Colleen, since you're really keen, you stand out in this board as being a really advocate for this. Would you be willing to amend the ordinance tonight to exempt the businesses that are already covered with state licenses and those that have federal licenses that endorse and regulate their storage facilities. You've heard 4 businesses here tonight that make up a large payroll in this town. Vermont Railway, who you guys aren't crazy about, Shelburne Shipyard, LCT, the fuel oil people, they all have addressed certain things that are flawed in this ordinance. And I urge you, if you're so crazy about going forward tonight, to add to your exemption list, make an amendment right now, make that add to your, all facilities are exempt from the ordinance that are currently licensed by the state and federal agencies. Thank you.
Thanks. I would submit that that would, a change like that would require opinion from council. All right. So, here we are, fellas and lady.
May I just offer that
Yes.
your council has reviewed this extensively, and this is only before you after extensive review of council. Just want to make that clear.
Yes, it's extensive review of council experienced in writing ordinances who has spoken extensively with an expert on this topic. So, we have given everyone multiple chances to speak. Everyone on the board has spoken multiple times. Would someone like to make a motion closing the public hearing? Moved by Colleen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Nay?
I didn't get to ask yet, but
Okay.
you... All opposed?
Nay.
All right, so there's 3 yes, 2 no. Would
To adopt the Town of Shelburne's ordinance regulating the storage, handling, and distribution of hazardous substances pursuant to 24 VSA C59, Section 2291, and 24 VSA C146, Section 1.3, 1.43, 1.44, 1.47, 1.48.
Are you including, just for a point of clarification, your earlier comment that the effective date would be
Yeah.
60 days from passage?
Yes.
Okay, so moved by Colleen. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by John. Any further discussion?
Was that change in effective date warned?
I think
For
it's...
the hearing?
It's a, not a material change, so I think it's...
Do we have an opinion from town council whether that's a material change?
My read is the ordinance, the charter provides that that's how you can pass an ordinance.
Wouldn't we want to warn that though, Joe? If we anticipated an extraordinary measure of passage?
Well, I guess you would have to define, to be fair,
Well,
what's extraordinary.
That's why we probably need town and council opinion.
Okay. All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Ordinance passes. Next up is item number 10, public hearing, second reading, and considering adopting amendments to Shelburne's traffic ordinance regulating truck traffic in Shelburne. Going to open the public hearing on this, and as before, considering a motion to read by title only, so we don't have to read the whole thing.
So moved.
Moved by Jerry. Is there a second? Seconded by Colleen. Any discussion? Hearing none, this is just a motion to read by title. Okay. You're welcome to talk if you want, but all in favor?
Aye.
All right, so open the hearing. Joe, why don't you give us a little intro on this?
Sorry, I gotta pull up the ordinance. Can I pause yours for a second? Okay, this ordinance is actually verbatim almost from an ordinance that the town did have on the books in 1997 or 1999.
1999.
And then subsequently it was removed. You know, I think at least I remember we've probably talked about trying to protect the town highways, at least back to when I first started and we did a tour of all town roads with the select board at the time. I remember talking about that pretty extensively with the board 3 years ago. I've reviewed this with the highway foreman. I've also reviewed this with our acting chief and Sergeant Fortin. And like I said, this is basically verbatim to an ordinance that Shelburne adopted in 1999.
All right, so we have the ordinance. Does anyone on the board have any comments about the ordinance?
I'm interested to hear what the public has to say.
Okay, be happy to turn it over. I'll give everybody a chance to talk. Everybody gets a chance to talk here. Go ahead.
I'm sure everybody will be happy to know I don't have the same number of comments. I guess all the question I have is, how does this differ from what the current process that we have now? My understanding is now if a truck over 24,000 pounds wants to make a delivery or a pickup, it gets a permit. Okay. Is the difference that under this, that whole permitting system disappears and just it's exempted by ordinance? I'm just trying to understand what the differences are between this one and current process.
I think one change between, well, actually currently the process is a little undefined, to be quite honest with you, so this would put some structure around it. We just really have a fairly undefined process right now. And right now there is at least one allowed truck route on municipal roads. Well, I'm calling it a truck route, but a route for oversized entities, and this would eliminate that.
And the only other question I have is, what's the relative, or the, how similar is this to ordinances in other towns, especially in Chittenden County?
That I can't answer. The only one I can give you as a matter of fact is this is, like I said, basically verbatim to an ordinance that Shelburne adopted in 1999.
The only difference is some of the penalties were somewhat changed.
Yeah.
All right, and Jerry, you got any thoughts? I know you've been concerned about our roads for a while. No?
Yeah.
No, and I can just add that in my experience, this is pretty standard.
Yeah, it's
load limits.
And I think it actually gives the police department quite a bit more certainty in terms of how they're enforcing regulations.
Yeah.
All right, you guys, or I know we're going to turn it over to them. So, I know there's some people here interested in speaking on this, so who would like to go first? I get to you, Matt. I'm just going to give a couple other people shots first, okay? Just to spread it around. Please identify yourself if you would.
My name is Patrick O'Brien, and I'm here on behalf of SD Ireland. And as I read through this ordinance, if I understand it correctly, there'll be a prohibition of trucks in excess of 55,000 pounds on your roads. Is that correct?
Well, I'm going to turn over all the questions for the details of the ordinance to Joe, but I believe that is.
That's the way the ordinance reads.
Reads, yeah.
Okay, so my question is, right now, we've got 3 machines, that one 40,000 pound machine, one 50,000 pound machine, and one 60,000 pound machine doing work at Wake Robins. I'd like to know how I'm going to get them out of there if this thing passes.
Well, I think that's exempted under this ordinance.
No, it's not. I just clarified that. It's not. Everything over 55,000 is not exempted. Section 3D. This exemption does not apply to commercial vehicles in excess of 55,000 pounds.
Wait a second. Did you give?
As far as I know, right now, we don't allow
3D? I'm looking at something else.
vehicles in excess of 55,000 pounds.
Well, we drove them in. We got permission. We drove them in.
Okay.
And the other point I'd like to make is that this would mean that if we wanted to deliver precast septic tanks, box culverts, or anything like that on our large trucks anywhere in Shelburne, if a lumber company wants to deliver shingles or lumber or anything where they have to use a boom truck to get something up on a second story, they're not going to be able to.
I think, doesn't the ordinance provide that you can?
Deliveries.
You can make your deliveries, you can do
Not
what
if
you
you're
want.
over 55,000, you can't. Read section
4E, I see.
4E.
E, right, you confused me with 3D before.
And that's no different than our current practice. Whether or not that's being followed, I can't speak to, but the current practice is permits are not given for over 55,000 pounds.
Okay, thank you.
Good point.
You make a good point, thank you very much.
You don't have an answer?
What do you mean, I don't have an answer?
How are we going to get them out if this passes? I'm not joking around. This is serious. I mean, what are we going to do?
Okay.
You don't have an answer. Will you at least look into it?
Of course we'll look at it.
Okay, good.
Paul Goodrich, I see you're standing up, eager to talk.
Yeah, I'm the highway superintendent here. We've had this system in place for a long time. They've had all their permits by me. Anything over 55,000, if it's a special or heavy equipment, they got more equipment that weighs more than the 55,000. They can't take the tires off, the tracks off, and rebuild it when they get on site. So all these contractors, Bears Trucking, you name it, we've given them a special permission for that day to move it in, move it out. It's not, they can't take it all apart. Everything you buy today is overloaded. And that's the way we did it for 20-plus years here, and it's worked well. So they're not breaking the law, and once they get them in there, they got to get them back out. And that's how we felt that was working way back in many town manager days.
Thanks.
Oh, can I, Paul, while you're up there? I mean, I know all these weight limits have a certain degree of arbitrarily. I mean, is there significant damage that you're concerned about at various weight levels?
In the spring of the year there is, and we put all their triaxles and the tandem, they're only supposed to carry 55,000. And most of these guys are doing that. And that's the way it works. But the minute you put an excavator on the back of a triaxle truck, a medium-sized excavator, that truck is overloaded 55,000. We'll put every contractor out of business right now if we do not let this happen. And I don't think that was our intent here. We're trying to save our roads. I think we're doing a pretty good job of it with the 55,000 pounds, except for the equipment that's got to be moved on site.
Thank you, Paul. Who else would like to speak? Matt?
Thank you. Matt Coda from South Burlington, here representing the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association, a nonprofit trade association representing heating oil and propane providers here in the state of Vermont. 55,000 pounds. I'm not sure where that number came from. It does seem arbitrary. We have vehicles registered for 56,000 pounds that do deliver in the town of Shelburne. There's a reason why you'd want a larger truck delivering fuel to you, because if you have a 10,000 gallon tank and a larger truck delivers to you, it only takes one trip. That efficiency means a cost savings to whoever's receiving the fuel, your towns, your schools, your businesses, your farms. And those trucks would effectively be prohibited from entering town roads in the town of Shelburne. And one thing to say about the truck drivers, some of them are here tonight. They are some of the most regulated jobs in the United States. Every single one of them has been drug tested, alcohol tested. They've had an extensive background check by the Department of Homeland Security. They have their commercial driver's license. They've gone through extensive training. These are good people, men and women, that know what they're doing, they know how to handle these trucks and the hazardous materials where they're driving, and they're well regulated by the state of Vermont and the Department of Transportation. I suggest, our recommendation is that you don't pass this.
All right, thank you, Matt.
I guess I'm
Go ahead.
asking for clarification. Is the reason that you're against it because of the 55,000?
I think 55,000 is arbitrary and would restrict some transportation of heating fuel in the town of Shelburne. I think weight limits are understandable, but you're doing registered weight limits of 55,000 pounds.
I was just trying to understand what, that's the part that you're, okay. I just want to make sure I was clear.
Let me respond to a couple of comments in general. When this was discussed, one of the things I wanted to make sure was that we didn't hurt the contractors. And by the way, I think very highly of SD Ireland and the work you guys do. And, you know, and I believe that getting equipment out and in was just simply a matter of a permit. And if there's a problem with this ordinance because of that, that concerns me. You know, and I'm glad you came. I do think that this town is in need of an ordinance so that heavier trucks, so many of which use Shelburne as a cut-through, and they don't stay on Route 7 going north and south. They go up Webster Road, they go up other roads, Bishop Road, and we have no intention of hurting our limestone company. We know you guys have trucks going in and out, and we thought this ordinance was drafted to protect those businesses. We are concerned, however, about those other businesses that choose not to use Route 7, but choose to use the shortcuts and are causing damage to our road and costing the town a lot of money. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, if I can make a suggestion, I got to be honest, I mean, the exemption is there, and maybe I misunderstood our highway foreman, and that's certainly possible, but that was added in this ordinance after talking with our police department and highway foreman. Quite frankly, I mean, if the board wants to
So just remove 4E.
amend 4E, there's a process in which we can, if that's the problem, I don't think, I mean, that's not a concern that I have. If we take that out, I think you still have a good, solid ordinance. And there's a process in the charter to pass the ordinance with an amendment. So if that's the problem that everyone has, that's one that I think is not make it or break it on my end by any means.
Yeah, we could just say in 4E, unless permitted by the issuing municipal official.
Right, I would say even adding a F to that line that talks about a permit, obtained by the local official.
Yeah.
Just as Paul mentioned, because, I mean, the long and short of it is that permitting system for these large loads has to be in place. I mean, it's a given. You can't do business today without that type of thing. So, by not saying anything here, we're doing a disservice to both ourselves and the people that need that type of comment. So, everybody understands it's a case by case, and there hasn't, as Paul said, not been a problem in many, many years. So I don't see why we couldn't add an F provision here to talk about that, or at least make it public so everybody knows that it exists.
We could add F, or we could simply take Jerry's suggestion and add at the end of E, unless permitted by the town.
Unless permitted by the issuing municipal official, then it's consistent with the structure of the ordinance.
Yeah, and I
that's
think
current practice.
that could solve a lot. Going forward with that thought in mind, please come on up. I'll give you a shot to, please just identify yourself again.
Trampus Demers from Shelburne Limestone. I think we need to actually start with section 3, and then we can get to 4. Section 3, and I'm going to read it, which I have. Motor trucks with a registered vehicle weight in excess of 24 pounds, it should be 24,000 pounds as it's in parentheses, shall be prohibited from all town roads or town highways. So my question to the board is that's registered weight. So I'm going to give you an example. I have a truck that is registered to 40,000 pounds that weighs 18,000 pounds. Is that truck allowed on the town highways? The registered weight is 40,000, but it only weighs 18. Is it allowed on the town highways?
Please explain why.
Well,
such a difference?
yeah, it says motor trucks
No,
with
I'm
a
saying, why is it,
What's the difference
why is the
between 18
truck
and 40?
registered for 40,000, but it only weighs 18,000?
Because that's the empty weight of it. But when you put the load in,
Oh,
the
okay,
registered weight
that
is
makes-
40,000 pounds.
That was what was missing.
Yeah,
Thank
so,
you.
so section 3 is where we need to start correcting this, because that's wrong. If we can drive anywhere in any town with a truck that weighs less than 24,000 pounds, who cares what it weighs, what the registered weight of it is? I want to know what the empty weight of it is. Okay, now if I choose to put more in that truck, then based on, right now, you have to have one of these, a town permit. That will allow you, in the 55,000 pounds came from the state registered weights were 55,000 pounds. They now, for a tandem axle truck, are 60,000 pounds, state registered weights. So that's where the 55 came in, because this is, as Joe has said, has been in play for many, many years. Obviously, it's a big concern for me because I want my customers to be able to travel on town roads and get to the quarry and then travel back.
Joe says you can. Could you explain why they can, Joe?
Yeah.
The exemptions talk about making deliveries to properties located on the above referenced highways.
4A.
That's correct.
So,
And-
and picking up goods, produce, and other materials from facilities located adjacent to the above referenced highways. So people go.
So
on to
is the 55,000 pounds gross weight, or is it a registered weight?
I think we just talked about the 55,000 pounds will be.
Okay, so that is,
Eliminated.
that currently is all the town roads, with the exception of the truck route that comes Webster Road, Spear Street, Bishop Road, as defined in the, right here. It says this permit authorized travel up to state registered weight on this truck route only from Route 7 to Webster Road to Spear Street, south on Spear Street to Bishop Road, east on Bishop Road to SLC and return.
Right, so that would be eliminated, but people would be able to go to your facility, pick up goods.
At what weight?
Well, in excess of 55,000 pounds, now we're talking about with the approval of a town official. So we're basically going to what we
So
have
we
currently.
need to go to state registered weights on that truck route.
I think we, like I
Not
said.
Falls Road, not Harbor Road, and other places, because there is no quarry there that people from out of state are coming to or in-state are coming to. Because you will effectively put me out of business if you put me to 55,000 pounds. And if that's the intent of the
No,
board,
that
then
is
that's
not
what
the
would
intent of
happen.
the board. I can tell you that I specifically spoke to the people involved in drafting this ordinance to make sure that your existing business
Then all we have to do
or
is,
businesses similar to you,
Sure.
not just you, so it's
Right.
not,
every business in Shelburne.
similar to yours would not be impacted such that you'd have a major financial hit or go out of business or
Yeah.
anything like that.
opinion,
And I was told that this would not impact you.
Well, does this permit still valid? Because I've got, I mean, if this permit is valid, which expires March 31st, 2018, the ones that we have now, and the truck route that's specified in here continues at state registered weights, then it doesn't affect me. But if you make it, as Joe is saying, and there is no truck route that gets to my operation, then it affects me dramatically.
Well, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I don't know how else to explain it, besides they can go to your facility as long as they're picking up or dropping off
Sure.
material, and they're exempt, they're fine.
But up to 55,000 pounds.
Unless permitted by the town, which you're already getting a permit for.
Okay, where does it say that?
Well, that's the part we
we're
just
adding-
discussed.
we're adding in that
To
clarification.
E,
Okay.
so I understand.
All
where
right,
to
so
say
now,
that.
and I want to ask just one more example to make sure that I understand this too. If a truck is in South Burlington, has well, it won't need the permit if it goes to 55,000 pounds, and travels on Dorset Street from South Burlington into Shelburne on Dorset Street to Bishop Road to the quarry, picks up product and returns back, is that in any violation?
I think that's
As
covered.
long as
I
they're
think it's
under, as
covered by
long
the
as they don't
ordinance.
go over 55,000 pounds.
If I'm understanding it correctly, I think that you'd be fine.
Yeah, that would sound to be permissible. You really got two issues here.
Yeah.
A permitting practice at the moment that's going to be by amendment officially incorporated here, which would, among other things, make good your permit, I would judge, from what now is an issuing municipal official until expiration, whatever that date is.
Okay.
And then you raise an issue of how the weight is to be defined. And that's a legitimate comment that we should consider about what's the definition.
It has nothing to do with the registered weight, it's the
Yeah.
weight of the vehicle.
No, I understand. It's a brilliant, but I think most of us would be quite willing to assure you that if we amended this by saying under 4E, after 55,000 pounds, comma, unless permitted by the issuing municipal official.
And so,
Then
and then
you
the
stand-
issuing municipal official would be a permit in which in there would be the exemption on how to get to our
It would, in
facility and back.
effect, that's a town manager task and decision, but my guess would be that would in effect incorporate that same system that's in practice now.
Right.
I just don't see how this impacts your business.
Well, it doesn't if we have a truck route. If we
Right.
don't have a truck route,
But the truck
it
route would be
infects me.
part of the permit.
Right, but.
It wouldn't be in the
but
ordinance,
this
it
did
would
not
be
say
in the
anything
permit
about
where it is right now.
Yeah.
It's not in an ordinance right now anyway, it's in the permit right now. So that's not changing.
As long as you amend this. Yeah.
Amendment, yeah. Yeah.
You're gonna be fine.
Because our goal is not to impact you here.
And I'm not disputing that, but this does.
Yeah, our goal is just to protect the road.
So if we correct this, then I think you fix, and a lot of other people here,
Yeah, you've
it's
got an
good, you're gonna
understandable-
probably not have as many comments up here if we fix
Okay.
this.
You've got an
So going
understandable
forward,
concern
I-
that this does not mention permit.
So anyone who wants to make a comment, please go forward with the understanding that we are considering adding to 4E language something along the lines, unless permitted by an authorizing Shelburne municipal official.
Do we need to, is there any specification about what that 55,000 pound weight is? Because he's mentioned registered weights, gross weights. Do we have to specify what that 55,000 pounds is? This is something I know nothing
Okay.
about, so I'm just asking.
Brian, why don't I give Brian a shot? I'll come back to you, and I'll come back to you also.
Brian Precourt,
Pat.
I don't think you fully addressed what Mr. Demers said.
Well, I'm sorry.
In Section 3, it says that motor trucks with a registered weight in excess of 24,000 pounds are prohibited from the road. Empty, full, or whatever, they're prohibited. So that's one of the first things you have to correct, because if I take...
Unless there's an exemption.
No, well, yes, let's say that. So if I take my truck and drive to a piece of property and I don't drop anything off or pick anything up, I've just violated this ordinance, because I've taken a truck with a 55,000 pound registered weight onto a town highway. It shouldn't say that. So I think his first concern has to be addressed. And to go on, I mean, when you have trucks that weigh 18,000 empty, to put a reference in there like that, because maybe we aren't going for a delivery, or if somebody's hauling fill out, is that considered picking up goods? So if you're picking up fill and moving it out, is that going to be good? I mean, are the police going to be pulling people over and saying?
I think so.
Other materials.
I think that's covered.
So
I
maybe
think
it
that's-
should be not registered vehicle weight, but actual vehicle weight. She'll be, no, registered, no.
Matt, you got another, Matt, and then I'll go right back to you. You put your hand up just 1 second after Matt.
Thank you. Matt Code again with the Fuel Dealers Association. Yeah, the definition of gross vehicle weight versus actual weight is very important, number one. Gross vehicle weight, a real-life example, a vehicle that is built, go down to Kenmore or Charlie Boys, and you build a vehicle, a tanker, that can carry 4,000 gallons, 4,500 gallons, that has a gross registered rate with the state of Vermont of 56,000 pounds. Your ordinance says that that truck cannot drive on the road because this was our interpretation, please correct me if I'm wrong, said it's gross registered weight. Now, if you were to tell that fuel company, hey, fuel's about 7 pounds to a gallon, just knock off 150 gallons, short fill it by 150 gallons, you're fine. You're under 55,000, but not if it's gross registered weight, right? So if you're doing actual weight, that's a different story, and you can accommodate. We certainly do it in every town in Vermont where we have dirt roads. You go on a dirt road, it says no more than 20,000 pounds. Well, those vehicles, even the smallest pedal trucks of heating oil, are going to be 30,000 pounds. So how do they accommodate that? Do they have little vehicles that just go on dirt roads? No. They take care of their customers in town first, and then when their truck is half empty, then they go out into the hinterlands where it's dirt roads. That's how we've done it since my grandfather was delivering oil in 1941, and we'll continue to do it that way. But you have to define whether you're talking about gross or you're talking about actual weight. If you're talking about gross, then your number's too low for heating fuel. We're talking about heating fuel that we need to stay warm in the winter, okay? That's important. It's important to us. I think it's important to the people of Shelburne. Second, if you're going to issue a permit, right, in order to allow something over 55,000, I suggest they do it like they do in other towns when it comes to mud season. One truck, one permit. So a truck comes in, says, hey, I'm 56,000 pounds, and I'm going to be in your town maybe Tuesday, maybe next Thursday, that they have a yearly, make it a yearly permit rather than a single truck permit, because we get calls in the middle of the night saying we're out of oil, and we respond, and we don't stop by town hall for a permit. But if you told us in the beginning of the year, get your permit, we would do that. If it's over 55,000 pounds.
Yeah, but
We
you're
just
making
solved that.
deliveries
Yeah,
to
you're
a
making
property
deliveries. You're fine.
in Shelburne, and so you're exempted. And
Not if it's over 55,000.
yeah, we're adding it with a permit.
Okay, so then my comment would be, if it is gross vehicle weight of 55,000 pounds, don't make us get a permit every time we cross the town line. Do a one permit per year.
So
That's what we do
you
now.
would like that
That's
55,000
what we
to
do
say
now,
gross
right?
vehicle weight?
No.
That would- no.
I don't think that
No.
changes.
What,
Matt,
that's what,
we have a permitting process now. I don't think we're looking to change that permitting process. I think we are simply saying we don't want trucks to use our town roads as a cut-through, but if you have a delivery in the middle of the night and you're over 55,000 pounds and you got a permit, if the town is doing it now once a year, I don't know how the town's doing it now, but if we're doing it that way, I don't think that's planned to change. We're not the body that's going to institute the permitting process. That's staff that's going to do that, and I'm unaware of any staff members that's looking to change that permitting process.
That's
So
comforting to hear.
yeah,
Thank you.
I think you're completely covered. Our goal here is to avoid those people who are using our town roads, not making the delivery to Shelburne. They could be on Route 7, they could stay on Route 7, and they won't destroy our roads. That's what we're doing, and I think the ordinance, that the way it's written right now, with the added language that Jerry suggested, covers that, and your permitting process isn't going to change. We're not looking to hurt your fuel delivery guy who comes along at 2 a.m. because there's, somebody ran out of heating oil. Well, we're not looking to do that at all.
I appreciate
We're looking
that
for the
sentiment.
guy who is, on Route 7, and he says, something, I can cut through this way and I can cut through this way on the town road, and we're causing damage to our town roads. And the residents of the town are paying higher taxes because of it. That's what we're worried about. That's it.
Okay.
All right, Jerry, go ahead, please.
Again, just in summary, I think this has been really worthwhile. because it allows all of us in the room to share in the development of a much improved ordinance, not the least because we should have put 1,000 in there in writing. We have an existing system, a practice under a greatly experienced and authoritative and outstanding gentleman that we're now going to codify. His practice in issuing permits it's a responsibility of the town manager and himself. I would have every reason to believe they're going to continue as before. And with your help, we've strengthened and improved this by the addition of just a simple amendment. So my sense is most of the concerns we've now heard are going to be eliminated by this extension of exemption, call it. And what we're left with, I think, is the decision about whether to amend registered vehicle weight to read gross vehicle weight.
Go ahead.
Well, the proposal, Josh, is to add a comma after 55,000 pounds under E unless permitted by the issuing municipal official.
But that's the thing is that
Yeah.
the question I'm asking is, what is that 55,000 pounds? Is that gross vehicle weight registered? I think that needs to be
That's the
clarified.
remaining question, yeah.
So I think, just, listening, I think one of the things I would propose is that under section 3, we leave it as it's written, add the word 1,000, of course, but after town highways, put a comma and say, unless permitted by a municipal official, which opens the door to the case-by-case or the, annual permit for a particular situation, and then we modify 4E with the suggested language from Jerry, which I think covers both of the situations that we've kind of heard about here. It doesn't, on the surface, limit the vehicle to a cast in stone, 24,000 pounds, takes it a case by case, so that the 60,000 or 56,000 pound fuel truck can be permitted by a permit. The same in the heavy construction moving equipment, same idea. They can have a standing annual permit or a case by case, depending on how many times they have to move things. So it just seems to me that might clear everything up.
Right, this board is not, to my mind, interested in drafting the permits. That's not our role, that's staff's role. Now, I'll get to you, but I told this gentleman I'd give him a shot first, and then you're next, okay? Hi, if you could please identify yourself, that'd be great. Thank you.
I'm Steve Owen from Freshwater Haulers. And we do have a place that we rent on Northern Heights from the Kingslands. And we provide a service for water, bulk water. And our trucks, yes, are over 60,000 pounds. And we even buy your water, Shelburne water, and we buy it from Champlain Water District. And we get calls to your residents every day. We do hundreds of deliveries in Shelburne and all over. Okay, and the way you've got this drafted, we will be out of business.
What, let me ask you, I'm
Yep.
not arguing with you, I'm just
Yep.
trying to
Yep.
clarify here, because
Yep.
I don't think anyone on this board has any interest in putting you out of business, okay? But right now, if you're 60,000 pounds, do you have a permit from the town?
Yes, we do.
So you would still be able to get a permit from the town?
Well, you're gonna tell Mr. Homeowner on the other road that we can't go there? Because they're calling us for pools, they're calling us for well water, they're calling us if they can't flush their toilets.
Yeah, but that's not gonna be any different than you.
Well,
than
you're
it is right
regulating
now.
on 2 roads.
What, say,
You're
can you explain
regulating
that?
certain roads for us to go on. You follow me? We've got to go into every resident in your town.
Right, I understand.
And you'd be so permitted.
And you'd be permitted to do so.
Where does that say that?
That's
No,
gonna be in the
that-
permit.
You're absolutely right. It doesn't say that right now.
Yeah, it doesn't say this, yeah, we're adding
We
that
just want to make
language.
sure that that
Yeah.
says that.
No, 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 I think you're gonna be covered
I think
here.
I think the confusion may be that your statement was you're concerned about people going through on other roads.
You've
and I
got
think-
2 designated roads.
Right, and I think to Shelburne Limestone, it was very clearly which roads they were going on.
We have to go to every resident.
Yeah, but that's, your current permits permit that, right?
So that,
So your current permits that you get from the town allow you to do that, right?
I don't believe so.
Well, then you're doing it without a permit?
We're doing it with a permit you gave us.
Right, so that permit must allow you to do it.
That's what we're trying to find out.
I don't think anything's gonna change.
Paul, could you add anything to this? Being the permitter?
I mean, we have to go when we get the call for any resident in Shelburne or Shalott or everywhere. We have to leave that facility to go load up. And we even fill at the Teddy Bear. And we try to stay on Route 7 if we can, but most of the time it brings us to the homeowner.
Yeah, I think you're fine.
If we're fine, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't see the issue for you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for speaking, though. Sir?
Nobody's called me sir for years. Maybe you can answer my question.
I probably can.
I'm Bill Bovan, I own BTN and K Incorporated, which
Hi,
are
Bill.
trucks.
Yeah.
I've had a question that I've tried to get answered for years. What is classified as a secondary road? Why I'm asking that question, every year I get a bill from the federal government for $409. And on that bill, it says overweight permit for secondary roads in the state of Vermont. Okay? And if I don't pay that, I just paid it last month for next year. When I go to register my trucks, the state of Vermont won't register them because I haven't given the federal government $409 for overweight permits on secondary roads in the state of Vermont. Nobody can tell me what a secondary road is.
Well, Bill, I gotta tell you, I don't know much about the federal government's requirements, so it's gonna be tough for me to answer that one for you.
Well, not only that, then in June, I get another bill from the state of Vermont for $280, secondary roads in the state of Vermont, overweight permit. So I'm paying.
Have you ever got a bill from Shelburne
Boy,
for
we're
secondary
missing
roads?
out.
I get bills from Shelburne all the time, and those aren't sometimes good. Matter of fact, I just argued one of them a while back.
We could do ours in September, and then you spread them right over there.
I've asked Paul this before, because why I say this is when we were doing that Velco job through there,
Right.
we were hauling some pretty heavy mud out of there. And Paul and his friend with the scales would be down there every morning weighing our trucks. And I said to Paul, we have overweight permits from the federal government. He told me to save my money because overweight permits were no good in this town of Shelburne. So
Yeah.
I said to the federal government, if you're giving the town of Shelburne money for their roads, don't give it to them anymore because they aren't, my permit that you charged me for is
I'm sorry,
totally
I
worthless.
just don't know anything about what you were charged for from the federal government for the Velco project.
But I'm
But
trying to find out.
Ann just raised her hand. I think, Bill, maybe she has some insight for you.
Okay.
I'm hoping.
Only she can tell me what a secondary road is.
So, I'm sorry, I can't. However, I would suggest that you contact the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission, and they have experts there who could tell you.
Okay, 'cause I've been fighting with Paul for.
A lot of people have been fighting with Paul, mostly about mailboxes.
You know, there's certain roads that we can't.
Okay, Paul, did you want to respond? Josh wants to say something, but before he does, I just want to give you a chance to respond. Did you have a response for that?
Every permit in this town reads 55,000 pounds.
Now, what's that other one that
I have no idea.
because you told me it wasn't any good.
Every one of these permits that the town of Shelburne signs is 55,000 pounds unless you have a special permit to move a piece of equipment.
Okay, so.
So everybody that's here
Right.
and beating the system, when they get caught by the cops, they're in their own hands.
He's a better scale in the scales because he can look
I
at
can
the
probably
truck.
stop every truck, and every trucker here knows me.
Okay.
And we get along great, but our rule limit, when we hand out permits, and I should have brought in my 13 pages, double-sided, we got permits for Quebec and everywhere else. The only ones that are exempt is Shelburne Lime. They're not exempt, but they run the truck route. They can't come out of Shelburne Lime with over 55,000, go anywhere else in Shelburne without a ticket until they get caught by the cops.
All right, thank you,
That's
Paul.
what we did for years, that whole road.
Okay, thank you very much. Josh, did you have something you want to say?
Do we charge for these permits?
You know, I,
Yes.
Yes.
It's $5 for a single and $10 for a fleet, I believe.
all right, who else would like to speak? I'll give you another chance, but Pat, I just want to give everybody one chance. Chris, is that Chris again? No, wait, right back there? It's dark back there. It's tough to see. This is. If you could please identify yourself.
Yes, my name is Brian Barrett. I heard some talk about doing away with the legal state highway to SLC.
Excuse me? You lost me there.
Okay.
All right. Who else would like to speak? Okay, has everyone had an opportunity? All right, so I think we're looking at two amendments that are pretty much the same and a correction of a typo. In section 3, just adding 1,000 after 24, which is already there in parentheses in a numerical form. And then adding unless permitted by an authorizing Shelburne municipal official. And then under 4E, at the end of it, adding unless permitted by an authorizing Shelburne municipal official. Is that right, Jerry?
Issuing municipal official, yeah, and which is consistent with the language.
The only thing that I don't think I've been is, do we need to specify what weight that 55,000 pounds is? You know.
Okay, I'm going to ask Matt to speak to that because he seems to be quite knowledgeable about that.
Well, the difference, I can't speak for any of the other truckers, but in the fuel business, you know, the weight is the fuel. So an empty truck is going to meet the standard. Some, not all, but some full trucks will not meet the standard. So that's because we have to, when we register the vehicles, it has to be the gross registered rate. When we build the truck, they find out they weigh the truck and they weigh it full with a driver in it to determine what the gross registered weight is. Not all trucks have the same gross registered weight. We can beat the gross weight, but the registered weight, no. So our preference would be gross weight, but then you're gonna either have to weigh our trucks or take our word for it that we're only, did a short fill.
But you're really interested in the exemption for 55,000.
Say that again? I'm only interested?
That's the weight limit that you're talking about at this point.
So when we're talking about delivering heating fuel in the town of Shelburne, if we're under 55, gross or registered, we're fine. But that is not 100% of the cases. There are certain cases where the weight may be more, either gross or registered, but you have to define the term. I need to know which one it's going to be, because that's the question I'm going to get asked.
Excuse me. Paul, if you don't mind me putting you on the spot, you're the one giving the permits and have been giving the permits for many years. We have, under Section 3, we're using the term registered vehicle weight. When we talk about the exemption that we're talking about now, should we be using 55,000 registered vehicle weight or some other term? Gross weight, 55,000? And that would be consistent with your permitting?
So if a truck is registered full with driver, full with fuel,
56,000.
it could be, not all of them, most of them are lower than that, but there are some that are 56,
But there's a state
58.
variance if you get caught anyway, so that's gonna probably put you right in line. They ain't gonna write you, they don't write tickets to get you millions of dollars. If we could, we'd have a field day here, but they're not gonna write you for that little bit.
No, but the point is that when we go on lower roads, we don't have different trucks that go on roads.
Right,
that
we
are
only-
All right.
We only
I just
have
don't
one
think that
road.
edit is needed. I think Section 3 talks about registered vehicle weight for a reason. 4E it doesn't specify registered vehicle weight, so I think it implies it's the gross weight. That's the way our police officers make tickets. They weigh the vehicle. If it's more than 55,000 pounds above, I mean, that's the way it works.
But if they, for clarity's sake, if our police officers are using gross weight, 55,000 pounds anyway, well, for clarity purposes, doesn't it make sense to include it?
Yeah, sure.
I would make it consistent.
All right, so with those changes that we've discussed, adding 1,000 after the,
There's no difference.
Want me to give a crack at the amendment?
I love Vermont. All right, so we're talking right now, and everyone on the board, please jump in if I have this wrong. Under section 3, after 24, we add the word 1,000. At the end of section 3, we add language, unless permitted by an authorizing Shelburne municipal official. Under 4E, 4E will read now, exemption does not apply to commercial vehicles in excess of 55,000 pounds gross weight, unless permitted by an authorizing Shelburne municipal official.
Issuing municipal official, yes.
Okay, with those changes,
I think there's heartburn.
we still have people want to talk? Okay, Pat?
Yeah, thanks. Section 3, could we, when it says motor trucks with a registered vehicle, could we change that to actual, which would allow us to run empty trucks that are registered, let's say 20,000 pounds on your roads?
The ordinance was, again, written and passed like this for a reason.
Yeah, but the other thing is, my sources tell me that there's no other municipality has an ordinance like this. They all go under the system like the town currently does. So earlier there was a reference to another municipality. I'd like to know which municipality that was.
I think earlier that was the reference to the.
And maybe it was the
ordinance.
previous, yeah.
It was the
I think
previous
so.
ordinance.
Okay. But my point is that it is a lot of wasted time, energy, and fuel having to make a delivery, come down Shelburne Road, turn up, make the delivery, come back down Shelburne Road, all the way back to our field, when we could just come across town if we're under 24,000 pounds. We save on fuel, we save on the environment, we save on a whole bunch of stuff.
Go ahead.
Isn't gross weight actual weight?
Yeah, I mean.
So if we substituted for registered weight, gross.
Yes, that's what I'm asking for.
Not
yes.
only in 3, but in 4, so we have a consistent description.
Yes.
Wouldn't that handle?
That's what I'm asking for, yes.
So change registered to gross.
Yeah. Solves the problem.
Yes, it is.
Okay, Joe, do you want to weigh in on that?
It's fine.
Okay. Pat, thank you for the suggestion. Someone else had their hand up, I think?
I did, but that was the same thing I was going to say.
Same thing, so you good with that too?
Yeah, that's the way you need to do it.
Okay, great. So we're trying, man. All right. So with those changes, would someone like to make a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved?
Moved by Jerry to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by John. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so,
Question?
absolutely.
And please, somebody correct me, procedurally, so since we've made an amendment, this now needs to be also noticed and voted upon, the amendments have to be voted upon at another time? I think that's what the charter says.
No?
No.
It
No?
said, well, do you want to read it? or do
Go
you
ahead,
want
you
me
go ahead.
It says, after such hearing, the hearing now that you just ended, the select board may pass such an ordinance with or without amendment, except that if the select board makes an amendment, which you did, it shall cause a short, concise one-paragraph description of the general topic nature of the amended ordinance to be published at least once, together with a notice of the time and place of a public hearing at which such amended ordinance will be further considered.
Okay.
So
Well, that-
you
that-
can pass it and,
Well, but doesn't that mean that second part means it's further considered? Doesn't that mean?
No, the effective, ask about the effective date.
Okay.
All right, someone like to, make a motion adopting the Town of Shelburne's ordinance to regulate motor trucks on town highways pursuant to 23 VSA Section 1042 and 24 VSA 147 as discussed,
As amended?
as
Yes, so
amended.
moved.
Moved by Jerry, seconded by John? Colleen? Seconded by Colleen. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Pass, I would like to thank everybody for coming in to make
Yeah,
your
thank you.
suggestions. All right.
That was good.
Our next item. We'll clear the room now.
I'm gonna take a bathroom.
Sure would like to talk to you, all right? And I'd sure like to talk to you too. My phone's in the paper, I'm listed in the book, you know, call me. All right, this one I think is not gonna be so controversial. We lost Jerry for a second. Gail, do you want to sing a song so we can vamp a little bit for a couple minutes? Okay.
Gary,
What?
maybe can we take a break for a few?
You know, it's 9:30. Let's take a 5-minute break. Let's give everybody a chance to just take a break.
Good idea.
Good idea. Josh, everybody ready? Okey-doke. I'd like to resume the Shelburne Select Board August 8th, 2017 meeting. We just took a 5-minute break. Our next item is item number 11, which I hope is a lot faster than the others. This is a public hearing and consider adopting amendments to the stop sign ordinance, westbound and eastbound to the Bay Road Railroad underpass, 2-lane traffic. And I'll open the public hearing on this. This is an item that the board has discussed for many, many months and had many, many meetings on. So, but before we go on, I'd like to I'm not even going to entertain a motion to read it by title only. I'm going to read the entire ordinance. It's that short. It says the Shelburne Select Board hereby ordains that the stop sign ordinance be amended as follows. By adding to paragraph 3, westbound and eastbound approaches to the Bay Road Railroad underpass, 2-lane traffic. The effective date of this amendment shall be upon passage, except as amended, the original ordinance adopted on July 13th, 1993 shall remain in full force and effected. That's the entire thing. So we're talking about a 2-way stop sign. So is there anyone on this board who has any new comments from the 37,000 comments we've had before on this?
If you've got the pain, I'll take it tonight.
Okay, does anyone in the audience have any comments they'd like to say? Please step up to the mic and identify yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Marla Keene. I'm a resident on Longmeadow Drive. I apologize for not making to the 37,000 other. I've been trying to save my comments for when the board is discussing the actual underpass and not Bay Road as a whole. So I understand the proposed ordinance is to codify that it's a 2-way stop sign, not a 1-way stop sign. Is that a correct understanding?
Yes.
Okay, so I prepared some comments. I'm sure you've heard many of these things before, but the natural and recreational resources along Bay Road are the jewel of Shelburne. We all know that it's going to take some time to turn the battleship and have the underpass widened, But in the meantime, to fail to provide safe multimodal access in its current configuration amounts to discrimination against the taxpayers who live north of Shelburne Village. Prior to last year's truncated experiment in alternating traffic, I never felt safe enough to walk or run from west to east under the underpass. The vehicle sight distance is just too short to allow for a car to move over for a pedestrian. Under the one-way configuration, I was able to walk or bike safely to the lake and enjoyed the same resources that detractors have safe and easy access to every day. I applaud the solution of posting a traffic control officer during special events, but to allow two-way traffic or to even enforce continuous traffic would be a move that hurts the many while providing only a few seconds benefit to a privileged few.
Thank you, Marla, for your comments. Is there anyone else who has any comments? Marla, I hear what you're saying. We're trying on this. I don't think anyone has, the so-called pony in the race in this. We're just trying to address a traffic situation at this location. The bridge, as you know, is not, the road under the bridge is not very wide. We have cars, bicyclists, pedestrians, all trying to use it. We tried the one-way, one at a time, and there were some people who agree with you. There were many people who had a different thought on it. We're hoping that should this ordinance, this amendment to the ordinance pass, that with some striping, that will help, and with the, I think, a larger signs saying two-way stop sign on the signs just below it or above it, that might assist also. So all we're trying to do is come up with as good a solution as possible, and I understand that there are differences in opinion.
And didn't we also, wasn't it also, there was, that pedestrians were going to have a right-of-way, or we were going to stripe it in some way, so.
I think the
I'm gonna let Joe take
striping is
that.
going to better define that it's two-way traffic. I think that the confusion has been that some people still think it's one-way alternating traffic, and some people think it's two-way traffic, so that's been causing some tension.
But there was some talk of it, of actually being striped underneath, so it actually, the whole thing would be a pedestrian walkway.
But we did that with when we were doing alternating one-way, but that I don't think is going to be quite as possible with the two-way traffic. Hopefully getting people to stop will at least prevent any issues between pedestrians and automobiles.
But I thought the solution, and pardon me if I'm wrong, but the whole idea was state law requires cars to stop for pedestrians in a walkway, and so if the area under the bridge is designated a pedestrian walkway, then if they stop, the pedestrians have the right of way.
No, we did that when it was alternating one-way traffic, Josh, but we wouldn't be painting it the same way with alternating two-way. Does that make sense? We did that when it was two-way stops with alternating traffic underneath.
Is there
We did.
Any reason why we couldn't?
Yeah, I don't think that would work.
Why?
Ann, please.
So, as you might recall, at the last meeting where we talked about this, Cy Sarapelli from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission was here, and he's a traffic engineer. So we're in an unfortunate situation where the width of the underpass just it's not ideal. It's an unideal width. And it would not be safe with two-way traffic to put in any kind of walkway for pedestrians.
Right, I understand.
So
what I was saying is, if the whole, just in the same way you have a two-way street, right? You have two-way traffic on the street. You have walkways, pedestrian walkways across a two-way street. If the whole area under the bridge is a pedestrian walkway on a two-way street, then the pedestrians have a right of way underneath it. I don't understand why that isn't possible.
I'm not sure that it isn't possible.
I don't remember
I think what
ever
we're
hearing
talking
that
about
before.
now is just putting in
Oh, I
stop
thought that was
signs.
discussed last time we brought this up, and it seemed like a
I don't
perfect
think,
solution.
I don't think I've ever heard that before.
No, it was when it was one way, and there was enough room
Right.
underneath the underpass to have a little bit of space for striping for pedestrians, but then it was switched back to two-way. Although I go under there all the time, and still, people still do the alternating one-way stops anyway.
I just thought that was an idea that came from the audience, that I thought there was some agreement that since it wouldn't have any effect on traffic, that two-way traffic, if no pedestrians were there, then it made no difference that if it was designated as a walkway, then pedestrians would automatically have the right of way, and it wouldn't affect the two-way traffic.
All right.
I'm not sure what else to say other than that it was reviewed by a traffic engineer.
All right, is there anyone else who has any comment? Yes, please, just identify yourself, please.
I'm Charlie Burnham. I live, like I said, I live in the privileged zone to the west of the said underpass. I just want to clarify, because I never attended any of these other meetings, wasn't here, and I do go under the thing, I'd say 6 to 8 times a day for one reason or another. The way you're about to pass it or are going to vote on it, it's possible for 2 vehicles to be under the bridge passing each other at the same time. That would be legal, and that's
Yes.
how it's going to be.
Yes.
The only difference between the way it was when I first moved here 10 years ago is that both of those vehicles would have had to stop. However, they could advance at exactly the same time, thus killing anybody who was walking underneath, I suppose.
We're hopefully that the stop conditions will really prevent anything like that happening. I mean, it was really unsafe when cars were going full speed with no stopping and no stop condition. This is our attempt to improve it, improve a very imperfect spot. So.
All right, is there, please, and if you could identify yourself again, and thanks for coming.
Hi, John Kohler from Shelburne. Still right now, it's still an alternate stop and go right there, but I think those are the only 2 stop signs in the town of Shelburne that have warning flags on them. And there is I don't know why we can't do something, because there are people that run those stop signs, there's no question about it. There is a stop sign, if you ever go up to the UVM Medical Center off of Colchester Avenue, they have them highlighted with LEDs around the stop sign that are powered by solar lights. It might alert people to the fact that you have to stop, and that would be beneficial.
Thanks, John.
We can certainly look at.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have it at the entrance to the emergency area.
Look, I can tell you,
Pretty
if we
effective.
ever come up with a solution that's better, we're going to investigate it. This is not, we're doing the best we can. If something comes along, we're going to do that also, or instead of. Whatever's best for the town and the residents, that's what we're willing to do. Please.
I know, come up and identify myself.
Yes.
Tracy Bowden. In lieu of having too much signage, could you also throw up a couple of yield to pedestrian signs on either side? Maybe that would help.
Okay, that's reasonable idea to consider.
Well, as far as Josh's idea, I mean, I don't think that's a bad idea.
I don't
I
either. I
just
just don't
never
think
heard
it-
it
yeah.
before, that's all. And
It's an
we-
interesting idea. We wonder, it's something
Yeah.
staff maybe, can look into for the future. Doesn't impact whether we go forward with this. All right, I think everybody's had a chance to talk. Anybody else on the board want to say anything again? Anyone else like to say anything again? If not, I entertain a motion to close the public hearing on this.
So moved?
Moved by Jerry, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Josh. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, someone like to make a motion?
So moved?
I think Jerry is moving to adopt the amendment to the Shelburne stop sign ordinance to paragraph 3, westbound and eastbound approaches to the Bay Road Railroad underpass 2-lane traffic pursuant to the provisions set forth in the Shelburne's town charters. Did I understand you correctly?
That's absolutely what I intended.
All right, Jerry moves. Is there a second? Seconded by John. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
At some point, and just curious what town staff thinks about that idea of.
Sure, yeah, we'll look at
Yeah, it'd be an
It's a
interesting
great
idea.
Yeah, good one.
All right. Next up at 9:45 is a presentation from Kevin Dorn, the South Burlington City Manager, regarding a resolution for shared governance of Burlington International Airport and free airplane travel for every Shelburne resident. Is it? Oh, no, oh, wait, I read that wrong. I read that wrong.
We can let them go, but
Yeah, we
we
can-
skipped one.
Oh.
We can do them in that order.
I was here for that anyway.
Oh, you were? Okay, so let's do, I accidentally skipped item 12, so we'll do that first. Review draft union municipal district charter for proposed regional dispatch. So, Joe, I see Ann is
Ann's got
standing
the
up.
presentation. You know what? I'm just gonna turn it over to Ann.
All right, Ann, all yours. And we have Lee Crone here. Hi, Lee.
Yeah, I should introduce Lee Crone from the Regional Planning Commission's been working on this, and Kevin Dorn, the city manager of South Burlington, is really here for the next item, but he's also been working on this with us, so he happens to be here as well.
I just want to say Lee Crone does so many things behind the scenes for this town, and he takes the best pictures around. Thank you, Lee. All right, Ann, it's all yours.
So that the thousands of viewers at home can hear. Is good? No. Hello?
You could probably grab Josh's microphone.
What? Jerry's off the board.
Okay. That'd be great. Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties here. Okay, so we're talking to you tonight about the draft agreement to create a union municipal district for a regional dispatch center in Chittenden County. What we mean by that is combining all of the major dispatch centers and our PSAP in Shelburne together as one entity. So there are many reasons why we're doing this. First of all, I want to remind you that this has been a select board priority for the last 2 years, and we are also a Shelburne Select Board priority. We're also doing this as a group of concerned municipalities because we believe this is going to cut down on call processing time. Other reasons are having to do with, we believe we're both overstaffed and understaffed in these centers. We believe consolidation will help us to not be overstaffed and will also help us to not have just one person on staff in some of these centers. That's a problem because there's sometimes no backup when a lot is going on. Additionally, mutual aid has been an issue because we're not all on the same technology and software, so we can't always see where other agencies are at any specific time when they're needed, and putting all of the agencies on the same technology would resolve this problem. Additionally, it's been pointed out to us that our fire and EMS agencies are not getting the same service that police agencies are getting with our dispatch centers. With consolidation, we can pull that to be in line with national standards and have someone on the line with our emergency responders to help them stay safe. So getting back to the agreement, I want to explain to you what a union municipal district is. It's a legal entity allowed by Vermont law. You'll recognize some of these names like Champlain Water District and Chittenden Solid Waste District are also these types of entities. In order to do this, a joint survey committee was created with much support from the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission by the towns that already have dispatching centers.
Who's that good-looking guy, the third one in?
So you'll see some familiar faces on this committee. So just to point out that a joint survey committee is allowed by Vermont statute just for the sole purpose of putting together a union municipal district. If anybody wants to know any of the information starting from the very beginning, when we had the consultant come in and get us started, and all the meetings and all the minutes, you can go to the Regional Planning Commission's website. So the agreement, I just want to point out, is much like a town charter. It was drafted by the committee and it's had a legal review. What we're really hoping for is that you will give us your comments on it. You'll take a good look at it and give us your comments on it by the end of the month, because we'd like to have all the comments incorporated by all the municipalities before we send it to the Attorney General's office for further review. So I want to point out that just like with a bond, by law, this would have to be authorized by the voters. So very similar, it would go on the ballot in March 2018, and voters would authorize you to join this municipal district, but that doesn't mean you have to. The governance structure would be much like town governance in that there would be a board of directors. This board would consist of the chief executive officers of each municipality, member municipality, I should point out, and they would hire an executive director to run. And this, I just want to point out, is a concept that we've continued to hold on to from the original consultant's suggestion. It's something that we still look at, but it's still just a concept and it may evolve. I want to point out a member, again, is a municipality that already has a dispatch center and is authorized by the voters to join. The opposite, or I guess a difference would be a contracting town would be like Heinsberg, who would contract with us for services. They would not be a member. How does the structure work now? Police chiefs, public safety chiefs, they run these dispatch centers. Legislative bodies control the budget. There's several organizations. What we're looking at is changing that structure to being one operation where there's advisement from those same public safety folks, but there is an executive director who reports to a board of managers. And it's one operation. So budgeting would be on the same fiscal year. It'd be very much like the other union municipal districts. There'd be a draft budget that would come to you for comment, would be finalized, you'd get a bill. Want to talk just a little bit about the Memorandum of Understanding. That's an additional document that explains how the funding would work. Initially, the funding would work in that you would just hand over the budget that you already had put together for the dispatch center. You would hand that over to the regional entity until a couple years in, when a long-term cost-sharing formula would kick in, and that would be based on calls for service. So again, the MOU is just a way to explain the funding short-term and long-term, and would need to be agreed upon before any municipality could have service. So the long-term funding would be based on 3-year rolling averages of calls for service, and this is a concept based on a $3.6 million potential budget. We actually looked at current numbers to come up with this idea, this concept. And it shows you that Shelburne would be 7.6% of this budget. And the reason it says 3.1 million on there and not 3.6 is because we've taken out the revenue from the contracting towns and the PSAP revenue. So this just shows you what the costs are now. These are what we would call direct costs. So this is the cost for the Shelburne calls for service. That doesn't include the calls for service that we get from the towns that we contract with and provide service to. Possible timeline, right now, we know that South Burlington is working on possibly using an interlocal agreement to join with Colchester to start this process. And it's possible that once that is done, and if it's approved here in Shelburne, that Shelburne could possibly be the third entity to join. And once there's three, then a union municipal district could be created. So that's the presentation. Do you have any questions?
So I understand South Burlington's paying for everything. Is that right, Kevin? All right, this is something that we have identified, as you said, as a priority. So we're looking now, tonight's meeting is to get a sense of the board, whether we're interested in going forward. Is that right, Joe? Is that what we're looking for?
So actually, so this isn't a decision item for the board, but like Ann said, what we're trying to do, not just in Shelburne, but for all the legislative bodies in Chittenden County, the members who are currently owners of dispatching services like us and Winooski and South Burlington, is to put this in front of the legislative bodies and ask for your individual comments and try to compile all those individual comments about the draft charter and the MOU prior to the end of the month, because we'd like to have all those before we send it to the Attorney General's office for their review. Right. And then eventually this will come back to the Select Board for a more formal approval as a body, but right now I'm not expecting that you have reviewed this with a fine-tooth comb before this meeting, but hopefully starting now in the next few weeks, members of this board will review it thoroughly and provide us with comments.
So let's talk about procedure just to make it as effective as possible. Would it be helpful if each member of the board, because we'll all have our own thoughts, reach out to you in advance of the next time this is scheduled for discussion, so we can have an understanding amongst the board what comments we want to forward? Because Josh may say we want 2 people on the board, I'll say we want 1 person, or whatever it is, and we should have an understanding amongst the whole board what our position is. Does that make sense?
I think that's an excellent way to do it, and we could schedule it for more of a formal decision at 2 weeks from now if the board's committed to compiling those comments.
And to be fair to you, and to be fair to everyone on the board, I think it would be helpful if everyone sent their comments to you by a date certain, so you had time to then compile all those comments to distribute amongst all of us. And I also think it would be fair to let anyone else, including our existing dispatch center, weigh in with their comments also. We have a couple of dispatch people back there. Should they have any comments, those comments can be considered also.
Yeah, I mean, certainly right now, all of our meetings are posted. They're public meetings like these are, and we keep minutes, so people can attend those meetings. And we have had dispatch people, not just in Shelburne, but in Chittenden County, attend some of especially the advisory committee meetings. So, I mean, quite frankly, the comments I'm most interested in are those from the legislative body, because ultimately this will be this group's responsibility to determine whether or not you're supportive of it or not. But of course, having said that, we're interested in not just our dispatchers, but anyone's comments.
I agree with that.
If they send them to us.
It's just that the way we come out, I'd like to hear also from those impacted most by it. I think it's only fair. But I agree with you. We're the legislative body. We're the ones who are going to make that decision. But I just want to give everybody an opportunity to weigh in, including everyone.
Yeah.
Anyone who wants to weigh in. I personally would just invite you guys to weigh in.
So
the draft materials are online
posted with the agenda, so.
Yeah.
So what do you guys think? Is that a process that's fair to Joe and fair to everybody on the board?
Yeah.
You good with that? So
So-
what about a date certain? When would you
Well,
like
so
our
not-
comments by?
Not this Friday, but next Friday would be the date certain.
I'm willing to wait 2 weeks to get an answer to my question.
What's that? By, not this Friday, but next Friday would be when it would be
Okay,
ideal
so
to
if
have
we
it.
could all get to Joe with our comments by a week from Friday, and anyone else who's interested in making comments, please access these materials on our website and send any comments you might have to Joe by
Yeah.
email, right?
Yeah, email's fine. And again, I mean, I think right now, not that
August
we're
15th.
not interested in
August 18th.
not that we're not interested in hearing comments or suggestions about the operations of a potential regional entity, but the emphasis here is really on the structure. That's the important part about putting together a union municipal district. So the most germane comments that we're looking for over the next 2 weeks would be specifically on the structure of this government organization.
Yeah, I'm very interested in discussing the membership. I'm interested in the financial structure. I'm interested in the voting structure. I want to make sure we don't end up in a situation like we have with the bus route where we pay a certain amount, but our voting is way down, and that concerns me. I am happy, however, that South Burlington is taking a big role in this because of the relationship we've developed with you guys, and particularly the relationship between Kevin and Joe is
Yeah.
quite strong.
So again, you know, I'd definitely encourage folks to look through the draft charter and
Great.
reach out if you have some comments.
Does
or
anyone
questions.
here have any comments they'd like to make? Lee Crone. Please identify yourself.
Thank you.
Oh, you can give Josh his mic back.
I'm Lee Crone with Chittenden County Regional Planning, and I'd like to thank Ann for the presentation, and Joe and Kevin and the other managers and chiefs who've been working with us over the last year or so. Just a couple of things I'd like to add to. First off, none of this work is intended in any way to suggest that all of our current dispatchers aren't already doing a great job dispatching emergency services. The whole goal here, which has been on and off the table for literally 50 years, was looking at ways to improve on current systems, help make them more efficient, more effective, maybe even more fiscally helpful, but there's no guarantees on that. It costs a lot to run these, whether on your own or collectively. So I'd like to thank the dispatchers for the work they do because it's critical, and most people never see it or hear it. They just know when the cavalry shows up to help solve their problem. The work that Ann did in this presentation was to help illustrate the governing structure of this. As Joe said, we're not really diving into operations. We know there's a lot of questions still to answer. The group of managers looked at a number of different models for governance, and the reason they settled on the Union Municipal District was it was thought to be an existing model we already are familiar with, as Ann noted, and it's a way to balance the political, financial, and representational needs of the communities that join in terms of voting structure, management, and oversight. So we're not looking to take things over. We're not looking to make things any more complicated than they need to be. But this was felt to be a fair and reasonable approach that we already have experience with in the county. Thanks.
Thank you, Lee. Anyone else like to add anything? It's not a decision item, so anyone on the board have anything else? All right.
No, I do, but I'll hold it.
Jerry's having a little fun here.
I just want to show off that I actually read the thing.
I've read it. Oh, you have a comment, please. Come up to the microphone. I know you.
How you doing?
Please identify yourself, Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Goodrich, Chief of Shelburne Rescue. And I'm not against this at all, but I just had a comment because we're a little unique compared to the other departments that are associated with this, because right now we don't get a penny from the town to operate our budget. And our dispatching is it's kind of an unwritten thing that they just pick it up in the police department's budget. We don't pay a penny for this. So I was just concerned and wondering, I know you're not talking financial yet, but I was just wondering how this would impact Shelburne Rescue, where this could be a $20,000 to $30,000 fee at the end of the year by the number of calls we have, because we have over 1,000 calls now. So I was just wondering, would we be allocated some extra money for this, or would we have to be looking towards raising money to cover these costs if we went to a regional dispatch outside of Shelburne? So.
I guess I don't know the answer off the top of my head.
No, and I'm not expecting an
2 weeks
answer.
from now, I'll try to have an answer prepared for you.
I'm just posing it as a question, and to take that into consideration when they're planning ahead and seeing what we do for our unique department.
Thank you, Linda, and thanks for all the service. All right, next item is a presentation from South Burlington City Manager regarding a resolution for shared governance of Burlington International Airport. And I understand the airport is in South Burlington, but owned by the town of Burlington.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. If I may go back to the prior issue, I want to recognize Joe and Ann for their work on the regional dispatch effort. You know, I will say that nobody in the room has his foot on the throttle as much as Joe does, and I know that's important to this select board. And he keeps us moving forward. And there are a few people who've really made a difference in gathering information and putting together things like the presentation tonight, which has gone out to all the communities, not just Shelburne, and that's Ann. Lee is coordinating this whole thing. So you got 3 of the drivers right here in the room from Shelburne, and the rest of us appreciate that very much.
Thank you for the comments.
I had, Councilor Chittenden is here with me tonight. May he join me?
Absolutely, come on up, join the party.
The resolution is Tom's that you have before you, and we thought both of us could present tonight.
Sure.
Tom is the author of this resolution, which calls for the regionalization of the ownership and governance of the Burlington International Airport. Mr. Chairman, you're correct. The airport is 100% located in South Burlington, but it is managed and governed by the city of Burlington. So this resolution, I'm speaking for Tom here, that we both worked on, really goes into some of the background of some of the issues that have been troubling over the last few years between the two communities. It has been well reported in the press, various controversies around requests made of South Burlington, of the city of Burlington, on things like air and noise studies, about the creation of berms and other noise abatement structures, about our solar array, and a number of other things that have not, frankly, gone responded to, and in some cases ignored. So much of this resolution, the first pages speak to the frustration of the community of South Burlington and its relationship with the city of Burlington. I suspect that this select board is not terribly interested in getting in the middle of that.
That was going to be my first question.
And so the rest of the resolution really speaks to the economic issues. All of the communities in northwest Vermont, indeed throughout Vermont and northern New York and southern Quebec, depend on this airport for being a critical part of our economic development infrastructure. Yet in Plainments, the number of people who are flying out of the airport has declined dramatically from 2008 to 2016, down from 750,000 in Plainments in 2008 to about 600,000 last year, even as the national statistics are going exactly the opposite direction. There needs to be a plan to ensure that this airport continues to be a vital part of our economic development infrastructure. That's important for Burlington, South Burlington, but it's also important for all the rest of the communities in this state. If we lose additional ridership, if the airlines decide to change out their equipment to smaller airplanes or turboprop aircraft, it will have a detrimental effect on our ability to attract job creators to our state and support those who are growing our economy. So Councilor Chittenden, I'd like to turn it over to the author of the resolution, but Shelburne might say, well, you know, we're a little bit distant from the airport. What beyond the economic interests that we all have for this airport would Shelburne be interested in? And you happen to be host to a VOR station, which is a navigation aid that's situated out here on Dorset Street. Many of your residents may wonder why so many planes come over Shelburne at a relatively low altitude. That's because it's the beginning of the approach to the runway. So the scope and distance of runway and airport impact goes well beyond just South Burlington, just Winooski, and just Williston. It affects the region.
Can I ask you, is that weird-looking building?
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So that's a...
It's a space alien.
Yeah.
It's an older generation navigation aid, but it forms the point at which an approach begins for aircraft equipment with instrument landing systems and other systems. So, so we're kind of all in this together. One thing that has been a concern, and maybe some of you have seen this, who've been over to the Plattsburgh Airport. Governor Cuomo has put about $50 million into that facility. It's a beautiful airport. Their employments are on the rise. They market themselves as Montreal's U.S. airport, and they're clearly going after a major carrier to fly out of there. Again, this would have a challenging effect on our airport, and what we have right now is a governance structure where one individual is running the airport, reporting to the mayor. There is an airport commission that has no power. It's purely advisory. And the belief is that a regional governance structure where multiple stakeholders had a role, along with the state, would be a better, more effective, and more current way to manage the airport. Tom is very passionate about this issue and will speak better to it than I can.
I think you did a great job, Kevin. Just one thing that I want to add is this is not my idea. This idea has been around for decades. I've reached out to all previous councilors that will sit down and have a cup of coffee with me. And going back to Jim Condos in the 90s when he was the chair of the South Burlington City Council, they explored alternative governance models for the airport. Really just recently, 2013, the Burlington City Council engaged a task force of 12 area leaders, including airport directors and JetBlue's CEO and Ed Kolodny from United Airlines. I don't know if you know Ed, but also Burlington City Councilors, South Burlington City Councilors, and they engaged in a comprehensive study. They hired a consultant, Frasca and Associates, and they evaluated governance options, explored 4 different configurations. And that body of local representatives looking at BIA recommended that the Burlington City Council explore a regional governing authority to shield the airport from the different political headwinds that can change over time, to also increase their bonding authority, increase their contracting flexibility. There's a lot of benefits. All we're asking at this point, it's been 4 years, no action's been done on it, so we think that it's useful for the surrounding communities to express an interest, to have a say in over how the public airspace is used, which is a public good, so that we can all have some input and stop squabbling over lawsuits over a variety of different things and instead focus on how to
Taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so there are some economies and efficiencies we could achieve if we weren't suing each other over the smallest things year after year. But that's all I had to add. Thanks for your time on this.
Oh, sure. Does anyone have any comments? And what I'm really, we have a lot of our own issues at Shelburne. I'm trying to understand why Shelburne should jump into what appears to be primarily an issue between South Burlington and Burlington. I mean, that's fair, isn't it?
And I would add Winooski and Williston have probably a more immediate and direct impact. Winooski's already passed this resolution. It's a joint resolution because Winooski has already gone forward with it. So clearly, the immediately surrounding communities, South Burlington, Winooski, and Williston, have the greatest impact. I didn't include Burlington in that because they're really unaffected.
Right.
But as I said, if the continued decline in employments continues into the future, and airport and airline service is affected, then that will be affecting all of your residents because of their use of that airport and your employers who need to get in and out of here. We don't want to see this airport go into further decline. I'm not saying that it will, And I'm not necessarily saying that a regional authority will be the savior, but I would say that the state of Vermont will bring to the table more experts in a broader perspective than exists today in managing and overseeing the airport. And there really is arguably no oversight.
Shelburne residents could get free air fryer.
There we go. Oh, we're done. We tried that with the ferry when we helped them get $1 million federal loan, but that didn't fly either.
Passenger train that supposedly will come in through, but I don't think that's going to happen either, so.
So,
All right, so go ahead, please.
No, I just have so let's say you do get these towns to sign on to this resolution. Where's the decision-making power in making this happen? Where would it go from there?
I think it would be the weight of public opinion and the weight of the regional community that would push this discussion forward. Contrary to popular belief, the city of Burlington really doesn't get any real economic benefit from the airport. There's not a lot at stake for the Burlington taxpayer in this discussion. The Federal Aviation Administration, which really funds the airport along with operations as an enterprise, will not allow the city of Burlington or a regional authority to use the airport as a cash cow and draw a lot of funding off. True, the city of Burlington probably, and I think does, put some administrative expenses in that it can justify, just as all of us who run enterprises do, but it's not a cash cow for the city of Burlington. So our belief is that a regional authority can make sense for everybody.
I would suggest that I would challenge your statement, Kevin, that the city of Burlington has no economic benefit, because that gives the lie to us having an economic benefit, which clearly we do.
Yep.
I would prefer that the strength of the resolution be in regionalization, which we've just discussed in one case, and to the extent of a municipal stormwater utility, we're also discussing, and which I very strongly support. So to me, this is an opportunity at regionalization. Now, I can understand why there wasn't more discussion of the authority that might result. Its bonding, its governance, its reach, it's the state involvement in that of some form, because you're urging action. I mean, the effect of this is to urge action on a city council. But I think it's legitimate to anticipate questions should that city council respond with problems. Who might answer them, and what might we expect those to be, and how prepared are we, and what delegation response do they respond to? My feeling is that there's a very pronounced economic benefit to this airport. If it's simply a matter of families going off on Thanksgiving, I mean, and we have a colleague who knows full well what it is to go to Plattsburgh. And I lived for quite a long time in Maine and know full well that your trip to the airport could be longer than your plane flight. So it seems to me this comes down to a simple matter that ridership is declining. I'm assuming they can't raise fees or other revenues in any proportion to offset that, and therefore it's going without investment. And it would seem to me that we would, together, in a ring, holding hands, we'd have some influence on the Burlington City Council to recognize that the necessary investment to be made is better made by a regional body than themselves.
I have a practical question. Thank you. I think those are strong comments. If you're looking for us to support this resolution because we're affected by it, wouldn't paragraph 3 on the last page also include recognition that the board be comprised of representatives from affected communities, and name Shelburne as one of those affected communities, so we know we're represented by this. Otherwise, you're asking us to say, okay, you're impacted by this, but, you know, we're not giving you any representation by it. So what about that?
I would encourage you to consider what Winooski did, which Winooski added a signing statement by the mayor, which offered some particulars about Winooski's circumstances in supporting this language. So I wouldn't say this language precludes Shelburne from being included, but if you did support this notion, an additional signing statement to add clarity as to your position as to having an interest would be more than welcome.
So we would have to go to Kevin Clayton as the mayor of Shelburne.
Well, that's fair enough. So this is the common document, and then each of us would add comments particular to our own situation. That's great.
All right, that's a great idea. I
Great
know,
idea.
before we spend too much, because it's already 10:20.
Yes.
This is not a decision item tonight, so just let me add before we end, does anyone here have any comments? All right, thank you very much for the presentation.
you for
Tom,
your
thanks for
time.
all your work, and nice meeting you.
For your service.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thanks.
All right, next one, I hope this is faster. Item number 14. Decision item, consider a motion to support the petition of the Vermont Natural Resources Council pursuant to the provisions of Section 7 of the Vermont Wetland Rules to reclassify the La Platte River Marsh wetlands located on Harbor Road North to Lake Champlain in Shelburne, Vermont, by having the town file comments in writing and authorizing the chair of the Select Board to appear and speak on behalf of the Select Board at the public hearing, which I believe is scheduled for August 30th off the top of my head. So, Joe, you want to speak a little?
Not too much more to add than that. The public hearing is the 30th. I believe comments are due, if I read this right, on September 11, 2017. I think that between now and then, there'd be plenty of time for the chairman to talk about this with the Natural Resources and Conservation Commission if that was an issue. So it's not like we're crunched on time. I think would be an opportunity to do a little bit of outreach since we have at least a month. And then this would be to authorize the chair to make our comments on behalf of the town.
Can we have wine, Gal? Gail Albert.
I do want to suggest, though, that somebody representing the Natural Resources Committee co-present with you, as we have some folks who really are expert in issues of wetlands and so forth, and that it might be nice to have a co-presentation before the board. I think it would have some power.
Sounds like a reasonable idea to me.
Knowing the people who are in the natural resources and I mean, they can provide some really powerful backing.
I'd be happy to reach out to you guys and
I was just
you
going to
talk about
say,
it
and
to
we
me.
welcome we welcome that kind of collaboration with you. And if you'd like to come, I don't know, this is August 31st. Our next meeting
August
is
30th.
tomorrow night.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
We may just still be here.
Yeah, we may still be here. This is like our longest meeting.
So Gail, let me ask you, so would you be okay of this, on the discussion, or this being passed before the Natural Resources Commission actually reviews it?
Well, I'd be interested to hear the comments of the Select Board, if you have any at this point. But I do think that we have not, as a group, had the opportunity to review it, because that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow night until 11 o'clock. So if you'd like to come and review it with us and hear the comments, we'd be grateful for that. It is on our agenda.
Okay, thanks.
I guess just one comment I would have is that I think the collaboration is definitely worthwhile, but I think it might be beneficial for both entities to present at the public hearing, just so that it isn't a myopic point of view of the Select Board, but it's more broad-based in the community. And, I think we've seen that, power or demonstrated before, where if there's broad-based concern in the community, that's warranted, it makes sense to do it that way.
Yeah,
So,
I see it that
Yeah.
way also.
strengthen numbers. But I think the collaboration, to Josh's point, we know that there's some, people on that board that could help shape a narrative. So I think it's very important.
All right, I'll get, you have plenty of time to speak. Okay, okay, Josh is deferring to you, so please step up. Identify yourself again if you don't mind.
So, I'm the owner of what's sometimes called River House, which is the only house I think that lies completely within the buffer zone as delineated by this proposal. I just wanted to ask, are you passing, it says here, consider a motion to support the petition tonight, which sounds like you are accepting the petition as proposed in its entirety, and you're supporting it in its entirety without actually reviewing it? Is that what you're doing? I'm not clear what the procedure right now of this agenda item is.
Well, the petition is to reclassify the wetland from Class 2 to Class 1. So what we are voting on is to support whether we want to support the agency's petition to change that classification.
But how could you vote to support or not support it if you had not reviewed the petition itself in detail? Which I just heard, it hasn't even taken place yet.
Well?
So I have concerns.
Okay,
I've read the petition.
I've read the petition.
Underlying statute. I've read a lot of law about this. And I have concerns about it as a property owner that would, in a sense, be reclassified by this. So this is a moving of the goalposts from when I purchased my property 10 years ago, and the rules are going to be different, and I'm concerned about how they might impact me. And as my representatives, I would hope that you would sort of look into that before saying, oh yeah, we blanketly support this petition, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think, just to clarify, we're not at a point where we're trying to say this is our comment to the proposed petition. We need to research it, but we need to have a spokesperson, which part of the motion calls out the chair to be the designated spokesperson for the group. And we need to do this collaboration to understand what is it that we want to say. And we also need input from the general public, if there's concerns or if this change is catastrophic, which we don't know. We want to hear about those kind of things. So there's quite a bit of work to do before this state-driven public presentation. And,
Okay, so the word support means that you support the process of finding out what it is,
Right.
not the thing itself.
Correct.
That's all I wanted to clarify.
That's correct, yes.
All right.
Yeah, I think we need to know what it is we're supporting, if you will, when we get there. But the state is driving this public hearing, and so we need to support that date. And so whatever work we need to do.
Well, when would then be my opportunity to make a more formal presentation with maps and things like that, to sort of outline what we think?
There are timing, yeah, you can, I believe you can go to the Natural Resources Committee tomorrow. That's a public meeting, yeah.
I can't get the signal to the Wi-Fi
Yeah.
here, so I can't look up my agenda for the exact time.
I will look it up. Thank you very much.
But I believe you're also permitted to, if you qualify as an interested person, then you can submit comments on this petition on your own. You don't need to go through us.
And go to the public hearing that they're holding.
And go on August 30th, you can make your comments, but
It's right here, a town hearing, it's a state hearing?
State hearing,
Okay.
It's a DEC hearing.
Yeah, I apologize for being ignorant of
No.
procedures.
You know where I live,
I
Charlie,
do.
right around the corner from you, and we were all notified in the neighborhood, in addition to you, of this public hearing. It's part of the state's requirements, so any property owners that abut that land track were notified, so.
Yeah, I just brought this up because I saw the word support here, and it sounded to me like you were all gonna raise your hands and say, yeah, we're signing on for this one.
Right.
It shouldn't be read as endorsed.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's your point, yeah.
All right, this, you got more? Okay.
Again, I'm not sure if it's worthwhile pointing this out here or tomorrow, but one of the things that I noticed in this map, if I interpret it correctly, is this really does potentially have an impact on the town and the town's maintenance facility.
Correct.
That and we really need to recognize there are potential issues, because once that's reclassified, then anything that changes within the town's maintenance and wastewater, I suspect is in there. It's hard to tell. Could be really significant, and realizing that it really does limit what the town can do within this buffer space.
Well, I think even more important is we've had a couple of unplanned discharges from the sanitary system through, mechanical fault, but this reclassification will up the ante there in a big way, that we don't want that ever to happen again, for sure, So you're right, it does impact that, so.
All right, so anyone else want to say anything on this? Okay. Someone like to make a motion?
So moved?
Jerry, if I understand you correctly, you're moving to support the petition of the Vermont NRC pursuant to the provisions of Section 7 of the Vermont Wetland Rules to reclassify the La Platte River Marsh wetlands located on Harbor Road North to Lake Champlain and Shelburne, Vermont, by having the town file comments in writing and authorizing the chairless select board to appear and speak on behalf of the select board at the public hearing.
Correct.
Okay, moved by Jerry. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by John. Any further discussion? And it doesn't impact that we're going to collaborate.
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering if we could,
At all.
we could add an amendment or add something that authorizes the.
I'm
the
happy
select-
to, we already have the motion.
No, I was
but
just
I'm
gonna
happy to make it clear that I'm fully supportive of your committee appearing
Collaborate.
and making comments, and that I would definitely collaborate with you, and frankly, I would hope that every member on the board would forward any comments they might have on this to me. All right, so you moved, did you second?
I did.
Second, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that's done. It is 10:34. Joe, is there anything on this that we can push off to the next meeting?
I don't think so, unfortunately.
All right.
All decision items.
All right, consider adopting the updated open space plan as presented by the Natural Resources and Conservation Commission. I sent an email to you, Gail, and to Peg today. You guys did a great job. Those pictures are spectacular, and your narrative that went along with it is just,
Did all the layout.
It is a beautiful document.
you're spectacular at what you did. It's just great. So, let's go, and hate to ask this, but as quickly as possible would be appreciated, I think, by everyone in America.
While we're talking dispatch.
Are you hanging in there, Priscilla? You hanging in there? Let me tell you, for 2 years, almost every meeting we had ended at or before 9 o'clock. For 2 years.
Then Josh and I came on the board.
Then Josh and Jerry came on the board.
So
And
much for that.
And in fairness, this is probably going to be the longest meeting that I can remember.
It's my first one. Here.
Yeah,
That doesn't buy
come,
fire.
come back again, 9 o'clock
You do,
is,
no, not the Shelburne-
that's what we're
not the
looking for,
Shelburne
is
side.
9 o'clock.
Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah.
Looks a little off. So thank you so much for having us. So my name is Sean McFadden on the Natural Resources Committee, and Peg Rosenau and I will very briefly go over the open space plan. Sounds like you've had a chance to look at it. So we've actually been working on the plan now for 3 years, maybe it's 4 years. I think we've lost track. But in any case, a long while. So first off, I'd like to acknowledge, of course, as we were just discussing, Joanna Ralston has done amazing work in formatting the document, in doing all the graphic design, in shepherding the process through many long years. And also John Zacconi did some early writing for the document, which was great. Joanna was able to enlist the help of some great photographers who really helped enliven the document, so we thank them. And then, of course, all the members of town committees and boards, past and present, who've helped us, including, of course, the Select Board and Dean Pierce, with whom we probably would still be working on it. And then finally, we should acknowledge also a UVM graduate student, Wes Dunn, who did some of the editing for the document. So just to start the discussion then, we'll first focus on what the open space plan is not. And if you can advance. So for this plan is not highly prescriptive. We're not identifying specific properties and then determining exactly how we would suggest conserving them. Instead, the document, or I should say that there are a lot of good reasons for taking that approach. First and foremost, conservation deals, that the basic tenet of them is that there is a willing seller and a willing buyer. And beforehand, it's sometimes very difficult to know whether that's the case. So for this document, we did not want to focus on highlighting individual properties. So as part of the revision, then, there were a couple things we actually took out of the original plan and revising it. You may recall that in the original plan, there was an actual prioritization tool that looked at various natural resource features, the prime agricultural soils, rare animal and plant occurrences, view sheds. And this tool is basically a simple algorithm to identify the most important properties. But that analysis was conducted on a per parcel basis, and it was also very heavily weighted towards large properties, so large parcels. So it basically told us what we already knew and also identify specific properties. So we decided to remove this from the revised plan. And similarly, the 2006 plan also had a set of basically financial scenarios, which ultimately proved unrealistic. So to streamline the revised plan, we did remove that. Thanks, Dean. So our guiding principles then for revising the plan were really to make the case for protecting open space. What are the benefits of the various features that we appreciate about open space? Of course, we also wanted to highlight the role that the town plays in conservation projects, which we know is very substantial, and then also show the range of mechanisms and strategies that can be brought to bear for protecting open space. So what is the revised open space plan? So we believe that it is a vision for protecting Shelburne's most important natural resources. So very briefly, again, you've had a chance to look at it. Why should we protect the open space? And this is where we hope that we have made it quite plain why there are many benefits that we should consider. So, thanks, Dean. So one of the first, of course, view sheds. This is very subjective, but nonetheless, most people in Shelburne would agree that views are important, both from a personal perspective, but also for the tourism economy in town. Shelburne has been an agricultural town for more than 200 years. Fortunately, we still have active agricultural enterprises in town. They're an important part of the economy. They're an important part of the town history. So another important benefit from open space. Natural communities, natural features, these items have their own intrinsic value, but they also have importance to the human community as part of the ecological fabric. There are many good reasons for protecting these. As part of this section, we did develop a new map that tries to highlight some of the important features in town from an ecological perspective: core forest, large agricultural fields, updated wetlands. So we hope that this will help shape some of the decisions ultimately in looking at additional open space. Of course, we don't need to tell you anything about water quality. You're already dealing with many issues related to it, but obviously there are many good reasons to think about water quality. To mitigate water quality problems, it's very expensive, so one potential way of helping to mitigate those potential costs is to think about preventing the water quality issues in the first place, and conserving land, protecting open space is a possible option in that regard. And then finally, the totality of all of those features and how they affect the way that we interact with our community, its natural features, but also what it means to the human community. Thanks. So those are the benefits that we derive from open space. So how do we protect those areas? So there is a chapter that describes some of the mechanisms, some of the partners that we commonly use. As you know, for most of our projects, we do work with other organizations. It's always a collaborative effort. So we provide a summary, for instance, of some of the past properties that were conserved with town help, and specifically with funds from the Open Space Fund. And while it varies, the town contribution is always essential in garnering the support from outside entities and ultimately deriving the funds that are necessary to protect open space. And then finally, what else can we do? So we know that we're interested in these things. Their citizens are interested, the town boards are interested. In addition to the Natural Resources Committee, there are things that the town can think about. Next slide. So the final chapter then is thinking about some of these things from a meta perspective. So of course there's the Open Space Fund, but in addition to that, there are ways of trying to develop better relationships with landowners, letting them know about conservation, thinking about regulatory steps potentially could be used for protecting open space, not merely in either establishing an easement or buying property. So we try to provide, again, an overview of the mechanisms that we commonly use, that we can use for protecting open space, and then supporting that vision of protecting those things in Shelburne that I think most people would agree are important. So a very brief overview. I know it's been a long evening. We'd be happy to chat further about it, or however you want to go from here. But thank you again for listening to us and for being so supportive over the years.
Thank you, Sean. You know, every 9 years I've been on the board, I've never voted against a request for purchasing a property or contributing towards the purchase. As a matter of fact, I don't think the select board as a whole has ever voted against any request by your committee. And I do understand that the issue is how much is budgeted every year. I get that, and I'm sure this budget season there'll be discussions again. But your brochure, I don't know if you guys have looked at it online. Looks great here, but online the colors are so vivid. It's magnificent. I see Kevin Clayton actually contributed 2 pictures. He can do a lot of things, that guy.
It's definitely a community effort, as it always is with this type of effort.
All right, anybody have any comments, questions? If not, someone like,
Well done.
does anyone here have any comments or questions? If not, someone like to make a motion to adopt the updated open space plan as presented by the Natural Resources and Conservation Commission on tonight? Okay, moved by John, seconded by Colleen, is that right? Okay, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Joanna, unbelievable. Okay, item 16, this is something we do on a regular basis. Peter, you want to take the lead, or Joe is, usually you turn it to Peter?
This is financing a highway department truck that we purchased a year ago. And what we find the best interest rate is to take out one-year notes, pay them down, renew them. So we're in the first phase of doing that. So we had a $95,000 loan initially. We're going to pay that down to $76,000 and renew a one-year loan for $76,000. And this will put us on a track to pay for the truck fully in 4 years.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Hearing none, someone like to make a motion to execute a capital equipment note with the National Bank of Middlebury in the amount of $76,000 with a term of 1 year and an interest rate of 1.42% to finance a highway department truck purchased in August of 2016?
So moved.
Moved by Colleen, seconded by Jerry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next, and the signature for this is coming around. If you guys could sign and send it back. Oh, multiple. All right, next item is consider setting the penalty for late payments of sewer bills to be 5% in fiscal year 2018, something the Water Commission did for their water bills. So you want to take it?
I'll just hand it over to Peter, but we're asking the select board to be consistent with what the Water Commission did. So I don't know if there's any other.
As it stands right now, if a sewer payment is late, it's assessed 8% penalty and 1.5% interest, 9.5% in total. With our sewer bills going up with our rates, we're getting a lot of negative feedback for someone that may just be a few days late to be charged 9.5%. So we're proposing to change that 8% penalty to 5%. That's consistent with what we charge for taxes, and as Joe mentioned, also for the Water Commission adopted the same rate for late water bills. So that's basically to try to minimize the impact but not eliminate it completely for late payments.
Thank you, Peter. Any comments, questions? None. Someone like to make a motion? Changing the penalty charge for late payments of sewer bills from 8% to 5% for the first month of delinquency effective July 1st, 2017. Interest on late payments will continue to be charged 1.5% for each month of delinquency. Moved by Colleen, seconded by John? Yes. Right. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next item is item number 18, is consider approving errors and omissions as recommended by the town assessor.
There's a memo in your packet from Ted Nelson, the assessor, and the recommended motion is to reduce the value of a parcel from $249,200 to $0.
All right, does anyone have any comments? If not, someone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Make a motion.
Jerry moves, I believe, to approve the errors and omissions for parcel ID 072005500 from $249,200 to 0 in the municipal and education grand list is recommended by the town assessor.
Correct.
Moved by Jerry, seconded by Colleen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Making up some time. I'd entertain a motion pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313, finding that premature general knowledge would clearly place the select board or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage in regard to discussion of a personnel matter related to a possible separation agreement with a town employee. I'm doing one at a time.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by John and seconded by Jerry. And this involves discussions over negotiations. So, any discussion? Hearing none? All in favor? Aye. And then let's do a motion, which I believe Josh is going to recuse himself from, pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313, finding that premature general knowledge would clearly place the Select Board or person involved at a substantial disadvantage in regard to litigation involving the town of Shelburne and Vermont Railways, Inc. Again, litigation strategy. Someone like to make the motion?
So moved.
Moved by Colleen, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by John. Any discussion? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and you recused yourself, right? Next item, next motion is a motion pursuant to 1 VSA 313 to enter executive session to discuss a personnel matter related to a possible separation agreement with a town employee and invite the town manager.
So moved.
Moved by John, seconded by Colleen. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Next motion, again, I believe you're going to recuse yourself on this, is a motion pursuant to 1 VSA Section 313 to enter executive session to discuss litigation involving the town of Shelburne and Vermont Railways. Moved by Colleen, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by John, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And Josh has recused himself. For you guys, to make it easier for you, we'll do our best to be as fast as possible, but it is my expectation, I can't promise it, but it's my expectation that we will be returning and that you probably want to be here.
The trail?
Okay. I just want to make sure you guys, everybody ready? All right. Hi, I'm going to reconvene the Shelburne Select Board meeting for August 8th. We entered into executive session, and the executive session was to discuss an issue relating to our longtime police chief, Jim Warden. As an introduction, I'd just like to say that Shelburne has a policy of operating in the open over the past 3.5 years. The town has embarked upon a new era of openness and transparency, with the board instituting measures to foster that environment, to facilitate dialogue between town boards, and to encourage civility. I recommend that everyone look at last year's town report, the Select Board section, to read exactly what the board has done to make that happen. And we remain committed to doing so in the future. Some residents, as well as media outlets, understandably would like to receive detailed information relating to this matter. Frankly, consistent with my goal of Shelburne Town government being open and transparent, I would like to give as much information as possible. However, state law requires that the issues relating to this separation agreement be kept confidential to protect the employee's privacy. I am happy to report, however, that I have been informed that this agreement, when approved, if approved, will be a public document. Should someone, a media organization, anyone request a copy, the town is required and will release it. Everyone will be able to read the entire agreement, and the town manager has just informed me that should the Select Board vote to authorize the entering into this separation agreement, that he will go out of his way to make copies available to everyone here immediately. It will also be posted on the town website as early as later tonight, or more than likely tomorrow. In addition, this is an open meeting pursuant to open meeting law. Before the board votes whether to approve this agreement, everyone will have the opportunity to comment. I will now summarize the key terms of this agreement, which are: Chief Warden is resigning as Chief of Police effective August 4th, 2017. Mr. Warden shall serve as Police Department Consultant until January 31st, 2018, maintaining his existing compensation and benefits, accruing no vacation time, sick leave, or compensatory time off, making himself available to the town to assist in closing pending matters, and effectively transitioning from his role as Chief of Police, providing no more than 40 hours of consulting per week. The town shall rescind Chief Warden's 3-day July 17th suspension. The town will issue a press release in an agreed-upon form and will limit its public statements to those set forth in the statement, which I shall read at the end of describing the key terms of the separation agreement. The town shall respond to any outside inquiries concerning Chief Warden's employment by confirming his dates of employment, his last position held, ending salary, wage level, and/or shall produce the press release agreed upon. Chief Warden and the town release and discharge each other from all claims. Chief Warden and the town each denied that it has violated any laws and deny liability. This agreement is a compromise of potential claims. Chief Warden will not knowingly make statements that might disparage the town or its reputation. The town shall instruct the Select Board and department heads not to disparage or harm Chief Warden's reputation. I will now read the agreed-upon press release. The Chief of Police for the town of Shelburne, Jim Warden, has announced his retirement effective August 4th, 2017, and will remain employed by the town as a consultant to the police department through January 31st, 2018. Other than this press release, the town will have no comment on this personnel issue. There has been much speculation in the press and among the public regarding Chief Warden's absence from work for the last couple of weeks. Chief Warden has been out on medical leave since July 17th, 2017. Chief Warden has now made the difficult decision to retire due to medical reasons. He has served the town faithfully as chief for 30 years. Through his time in Shelburne, Chief Warden helped grow the dispatch center from serving a few agencies to serving 32 emergency agencies. Also, as the landscape of crime changed in Shelburne, Chittenden County, and across the country, Chief Warden felt it was important that the town have a team of officers trained specifically for situations beyond the norm of regular policing, and thus started the response team. He also helped start the Explorers Program and received the William H. Spurgeon III Award, the highest recognition for those contributing significant leadership to the Exploring Program. Throughout his tenure, he served as acting town manager when needed and for 9 months in between town managers while still fulfilling his duties as chief. In addition to managing the police department, Chief Warden would often be seen taking calls, directing traffic, and working concerts side by side with his fellow officers. In his off-duty time, Chief Warden has provided dog obedience classes through the Shelburne Recreational Department for over 20 years. Around the holidays, the chief could be seen wearing a red velvet suit and hat, riding on the fire truck to meet the children of Shelburne. With his jovial laugh and ability to recall the names of each child, their parents, or perhaps their dogs, Chief Warden always kept the magic alive for those kids meeting Santa. Chief Warden will act as a consultant to the police department through the end of the year in order to assure a smooth transition to new leadership. The department will be greatly benefited by his assistance during this period. The town thanks Chief Warden for his many years of protecting and serving the people of Shelburne and wishes him all the best in his well-deserved retirement. Pursuant to open meeting law, are there any comments by anyone? Please note that should the Select Board vote to approve this separation agreement, that Chief Warden has 21 days beginning August 4th to consider signing it, and I just learned he has already signed it, and may revoke the agreement within 7 days of signing it. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to approve the separation agreement and general release and authorize the chair of the Select Board to sign it on behalf of the town as its duly authorized agent.
So moved.
Moved by John.
Second.
Seconded by Jerry. Any further discussion? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Jerry. Is there a second? Seconded by Colleen. Any further discussion? Hearing none? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.